put the space. I'll put the link in the chat. Last time I tried to do a space, it didn't work. Actually, my audio was messed up. Let's make sure it works okay this time. Damn, look at that cat. It's crazy big. Down for whatever, chilling, just getting things going. Can somebody join in and raise a hand so I can make sure that everything's working cool? Hello to the new joiners of the space. I don't know how to. I know there's a way to play music at the beginning of the space. I don't know how to do that. If I figure it out, I'll play some lobby music. This is going to start in the next 5 minutes or so. We'll get some speakers in here. I think Neil, Gnostic Informant, he's going to join. We're going to talk over an interesting subject we've been going back and forth about a little bit. I'm streaming live right now. The show is live, kick.com/BigTech. You can watch on Kick. Hope everybody goes over there and makes an account and watch me there. You can also watch, I have a live stream feed right here on X. The stream's available there, but you can also hang out in here. So this space will be restreamed onto my live stream. And yeah, looks like we're just gonna chill out for a minute, wait for Neil to show up. See who shows up. I don't see any hands raised. Guys, somebody from the chat jump into space and raise a hand. I want to make sure that the mics are working. Somebody needs to request a mic, but we'll get Neil in here in just a minute. So everybody just stand by. Thank you. It's good. Space is working. Cool. Let's see. Looks we got a request. There's Amalek. Get Thulian up. All right, we got a couple speakers. What's up, guys?
So
everything working normal? You can hear me, right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, cool.
He's on. I don't know how to play music through this stuff. I gotta show you how to set up that thing that Anton showed me. I think you figured out how it works.
Being able to pipe audio through into the space.
Sound pad, and there's like a demo on it on Steam. You can try that. Not now, but just in the future or whatever. And you can just like take files from your computer or whatever and just have them play through an audio output, right? So that should work theoretically.
All right. Sounds cool. Yeah, that'll be good. Oh, look who's here. It's Adam Green. Hey, what's up, Adam? No more news? It's the big dog.
Yo, we're doing a space to put this theory to bed once and for all, huh? Good to see it.
Yeah, you'll like if that. Yeah, maybe it'll go like that. Yeah, so I mean, no better time than now.
Have you been up all night or something? Or are you just back up early?
Up a little early. Yeah, I actually slept so much yesterday. I went all the way around, so I was up early today.
Okay, got it back in line.
Yeah, we're back in line, maybe.
I was getting ready to set up my stream right now, so I might just catch the beginning of this one.
Okay. Yeah, Neil said he was going to join at 11:30. He's fashionably late, but that's all right. No hurry. But yeah, he said he can jump on today. We're gonna just chat this over. You got any thoughts? Maybe questions we should ask or specific? What you got any input on it?
Yeah, a lot, but I don't want to do an overview right now. I'll wait until the topics get brought up, the specifics get brought up. Hey, I went out to the beach, a really popular beach with like a lot of like more of a college town, and did a ton of interviews last night.
Oh, cool.
I just got them uploaded up on the computer. It's gonna be a really good edit.
That screenshot you shared, that girl was like googly eyed over you. That shit's so funny to me. That's cracking me up.
There was a lot of girls at this beach and some other interesting characters. But I was doing more, not just asking them questions, but I was doing a little green pilling too and explaining to them Jesus didn't exist and who created him and why, type of stuff. It's crazy to see the look on their face when you tell them something that they've never fully comprehended before.
Were they shocked?
So I'm looking
were they
forward
upset?
to that. What?
Were they disgusted
Or
interested?
The one girl, Amalek, that I showed the screenshot of, she prayed for me. She did a prayer for me.
Oh, that's good. I like that. That sounds.
Yeah. She's like, can I put my hand on you? And then prayed for me.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's hilarious. I do a lot of that, talking to like normies about this stuff too, like in real life, not with a camera or anything like that. And that is kind of a lot of the reactions I get is pretty much what you're describing. I'm gonna pray for you and all this other stuff. I gotta be up to like 20 to 30 prayers a day from these Christians at this point.
You know, one of the themes that I think will be conveyed in the video that I notice is a lot of these people have never really thought about that Jesus is a Jewish Messiah. They don't really realize. I mean, if you ask them and you kind of pry it out of them, they'll kind of, most of them like know a little bit that like God's chosen people are Jews and this is a Jewish religion. These Christians don't really know anything about Judaism at all. And they just think Jesus died to save their sins. They don't really put it together like it's a Yom Kippur and it's blood magic and it's the Jewish Messiah and like what is the role of the Jewish Messiah, all of that. They don't really have a good comprehension of. So it's interesting. It's fun. It's got real nice. It's right on the boardwalk of the beach too during the sunset, the golden hour, the whole thing. So I can't wait for you guys to see it.
That's sick.
Cool. Yeah, that's, so many of them, man. So many Christians.
You don't see Atwell on the beach, Jesus pilling people on camera. Caesar Messiah pilling people on camera.
Yeah, where is he at?
Well, I told you he wrote an UNS review article that they posted last week.
Oh, I don't remember you telling me that. He did?
Yeah. Hey, I'm not sure if maybe it went private or something, but Myth Vision hosted a debate between David Skirbina and James Valiant, who wrote a book, Creating Christ. Yeah. And he does Roman provenance as well. And has pretty much the same theory. You did?
Yeah. Yeah, I got to check those out. I'm trying to... I gotta see what these guys
Once
are
you
saying.
read it, read the review that Carrier did a review on it, and the way he summarizes it is exactly what I felt when I was reading it. Like it doesn't really make an argument. It's just kind of like just a lot of unsubstantiated,
just a lot of theory,
innuendo, and like like that alone. Yeah, I've been completely underwhelmed. Okay, what's up, Neil?
Hope you weren't waiting long. What's up, Neil? Thanks for joining.
What's up, man?
What's up? Cool. Yeah,
what are your thoughts on what are your opening thoughts on Caesar's Messiah and Roman provenance?
So I used to be really into it, actually. I think there's a lot of things he gets right, because like there is obviously like in the Roman intelligentsia in the first century BC, Philo's time, there is a lot of like crossover going on, cross-pollination. In fact, one of the general that was on the siege of Jerusalem in 70 AD is Tiberius Julius Alexander, who was Philo's nephew. Philo wrote like the most theology you can, like he's the biggest theologian you're going to find in that period. He wrote like hundreds of pages of Jewish theology that you find. It looks like proto-Christianity, like the logos, the idea of God having a son, the idea of there being triads of God, which is like corporal and spiritual, that type of stuff. And his nephew, Tiberius Julius Alexander, was the prefect of not only Judea in his earlier, after Pontius Pilate, but then he became the prefect of Alexandria, Egypt. So there's some truth to like there being like heavy big shots in the Roman, high up in the Roman, you know, uh, patrician class that are sort of in control of some of the religious stuff. But I just once you start getting into the idea of the Vespasian and the Flavians being involved, it just kind of falls apart for me. It just doesn't make any sense. Like a lot of some of the stuff that he puts in that book, he says like Jesus went to all these places in the Gospels, and so did Vespasian, and he sort of cherry picks. It's been a while since I looked at it. We can look at it, like we can look at it together. But he sort of cherry picks like which parts he wants to compare, because if you look at the gospel, he takes all the gospel as a whole. First of all, that's like one of the biggest things you should never do. Is to take one at a time. Like, are we looking at Mark? Are we looking at Matthew? What are we doing? He like takes them all four at once, and then he goes, okay. In this particular passage, Jesus goes to this city Tyre, and then oh look, Vespasian also went to the city of Tyre here, and then he kind of makes a case that they're all lined up perfectly, but really he's leaving out certain places and certain times too. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
it looks like he's kind of cherry picking the data a little bit. That was one of the criticisms that I noticed people threw at him too, is when he makes that comparison. But I don't know. I haven't looked at that in a while. Why? What do you think?
You throwing that back to Adam? What do you think, Adam?
Well, whoever. But
yeah, I'll tell you what I think
is,
too. Go ahead.
One more thing I want to say about that. I didn't even think about this. It almost doesn't make sense that you would want if you're entire, because he says like the reason why they're doing it is because they're trying to curve fundamentalism, like Jewish terrorism, like the zealots and all that stuff. And so his way of doing it was like producing this gospel that's like, love your neighbor, turn the other cheek. And there's one of the big problems with that is you already see that theology in figures like what's his name, the first century rabbi who says love your neighbor as yourself. Well, I forgot his name. I'm looking it up right now. What the hell is his name again?
Shmuley, Rabbi Shmuley.
No, that's not his name. You're talking about Shmuley?
Shmuley Boteat, first century.
Yeah,
rabbi.
no, I think it's, what is it? This one's saying Rabbi Akiva, but that's not it. But actually, I don't know if he even goes by Rabbi. It's like a Jewish sage that said that. I don't know why I can't think of his name right now. Here it is. I think I found it. No, this isn't it. The point is that type of theology was already there before like way before the Gospels. You already see, and then in Philo himself, you start seeing that type of stuff. That is so he says like love your neighbor as yourself. That is the whole Torah. That's in Judaism before Jesus. I don't know why I can't think of this fucking guy's name, dude. I was just talking about him not that long ago. I wonder if anyone is watching that can. I'll think of it in a second. But anyways, another thing too, besides the fact that this theology was already present in Judaism, in Hellenized Judaism, why would Vespasian want to give the credit to a random Jewish guy and not himself, and then go to his grave not knowing that like this Jesus guy is going to get all the credit for his own stuff? And then it's like, and another point that I think that I don't know if he makes this or if it's Valiant that makes this, James Valiant, who wrote Creating Christianity. He says that like Constantine was in on this. And the reason why he thinks that is because Constantine's name is Flavius Constantine. And the reason why that falls apart is, one, Flavius was a name that a lot of people had. It's like Michael. It's like one of the most common names in Roman patrician names. And his father had the name Flavius. He was a pagan. And then if Constantine knew this, that would mean all the emperors before them would have had access to this intelligence as well. So why would Diocletian right before him be persecuting the Christians and making them illegal? And Decius did the same thing. And then lastly, Bar Kokhba. I mean, Hadrian was just going ham on Christians and Jews alike. Hadrian's succeeded Trajan, Trajan was the consul of Rome during Vespasian's reign. So Trajan would have known about this project, and Hadrian probably would have known about it too. So it's just like the idea of like these Roman emperors like not knowing about this project, and then all of a sudden Constantine remembers this project 300 years later. That doesn't make any sense either. I don't know, I'm just thinking of things on top of my head right now. But what do you think about all that?
It was Hillel. The schools in Judaism were Hillel.
Hillel the Elder. Yeah, I couldn't think of his name.
Yeah, he said, "What is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow."
Yeah. And when did he live again? What was his dates that he lived in?
110 BCE to 10 CE.
So the whole century before Christianity even existed, you already had Jews that were sort of like preaching these ideas that according to Atwell, was inserted into Christianity to sort of quell the zealots. But that doesn't, if that was the case, Hillel the Elder, then that doesn't make any sense. Like what is Hillel the Elder doing then? You know what I mean?
And the son of Hillel is Gamaliel, the top rabbi in the Talmud and the leader of the Sanhedrin, and
which makes it more interesting though.
The one who trained Paul,
the supposed teacher of Paul too, if you believe Acts, that Paul trained at the foot of Gamaliel.
Yeah. Which makes it more interesting because it kind of goes along with what he's saying, but not in the same way. Like it's not like a big Roman conspiracy. It just shows you the lineage of these ideas from pre-Christian to Christian. Like Philo and Hillel are almost like proto-Christian figures in Judaism. Philo with the theology and the adding like basically inheriting all this Platonism, Middle Platonism stuff that you get, the logos, all that stuff, and then Hillel with all the stuff that Adam just pointed out. You can see Christianity is forming before Paul and Jesus even existed.
Okay.
Yeah, especially in Psalms of Solomon, Wisdom of Solomon, First Enoch, and in other Dead Sea Scrolls like the Pierced Messiah Scroll in Q174. All of that you can see, which is all Jewish tradition leading up and culminating in Christianity, which is why it makes no sense at all that the Romans would have like finished the package of this Jewish midrash Pesherim. I want to throw this out from the start for you, Neil. How weird is it, the letter of Pliny to Trajan, Pliny the Younger, that if his dad was Pliny the Elder and he was right there at the highest levels of Roman power, how would his letter, he doesn't even know anything about Christians or what to do with them. If it was a Roman conspiracy, he would know all about Christianity. So I think that's a huge debunk.
I'm so glad you just brought that up. I forgot about that. BigTech, this is such a big deal what you just said right there, because Trajan was the emperor in the 2nd century, but in the late 1st century, Trajan was the consul. So he was like the 3rd most powerful person in the world under Vespasian and his son. So he was the consul, I forgot what year, it's in the 70s at some point. So he would have been, while Vespasian is creating Christianity, Trajan would have been around to know, like he would have been in those circles, assuming, like obviously there's a possibility they did this so secretly that even the consul didn't know, but then who is he doing it with? You know what I mean? So like if the consul of Rome doesn't even know about it, and like Adam just said, a few decades goes by, Trajan writes a letter to, Pliny writes a letter to Trajan going, I just encountered these weird Christians. They're over here in Paphlagonia. They're doing a bunch of weird shit. I made them worship your image, and they did it. Some of them didn't, but most of them did. And he's like, yeah, I don't know who these people are. It's like, wait a minute. You were the consul of Rome during Vespasian's reign, and you don't know what this, like this, the whole thing starts to make no sense, you know?
Yeah, so if it was developed by Rome, or like with the consent of Rome at least, or with some sort of like insider knowledge of the Romans in Vespasian's crew, it makes sense that the consul would have at least known that was going on. It wouldn't just be...
Yeah, like they're basically, the way it goes is the Roman emperor is obviously the most powerful. Then usually the second most powerful person of the empire was usually the prefect of Egypt. because of how many people they were in charge of, because of how important it was to keep Egypt in. Like there was always the second most powerful person was always on that spot, and then usually the most powerful person after that was whoever the consul of Rome was, and that Trajan was in that position during Vespasian's reign for like 2 years. So he was very, very high up, and like the fact that decades later he's hearing about Christians for the first time in his entire life kind of just defeats the whole entire art. Like it just totally makes the whole thing fall apart. I forgot about that. Adam brought up like probably the best point you can ever possibly in this whole thing.
I've actually got so the rebuttal to that I heard from the fellow in my audience who's been pushing this theory pretty hard. Like he's pretty bought in on it. He says that the correspondence between Pliny and Trajan is not really like good evidence that the Christians were being persecuted by Rome, because the person,
well, even if it was or wasn't, it's still Trajan still barely knows who they are.
Well, he says,
So,
like, and I haven't read these correspondence.
And Pliny barely knows who they are too, and he was the consul and one of the most top Roman officials.
His uncle was Pliny the Elder, who was traveling around Judea. He knew the Essenes. But like,
this was some huge Roman conspiracy to because I don't know, BigTech, if you want to back up and start off, or maybe I missed the beginning, but a lot of people might not even know what Caesar's Messiah conspiracy is.
Yeah,
we're like already trying to debunk it, and we haven't even stated what it is, or did you?
I just want to say real quick though, I agree with you that whoever said that Trajan's not really persecuting Christians; he's just making sure they just follow the law. But like,
yeah, exactly. So he says that the TLDR, and I haven't read the correspondence, but he basically says that like Pliny's like, hey, are these Christians cool? And then Trajan's like, yeah, bro, just make sure they pledge allegiance to the Caesar, and then they're sweet. Is that basically how it is? Right.
But the point is, they're hearing about these people for when you read the letter, I can pull up the letter, the correspondence back and forth. The way they're talking about them is if they've never heard of them before. The first time they're ever hearing about Christianity is in this letter right here. It's almost like they don't even know Josephus, which is another reason why people think Josephus might be a forgery. Pliny might be the first time Christians are even mentioned ever. It might be. And some people think that.
You don't mean Josephus, the guy, is a forgery, like he's a fake. You just mean like the passage about
in book
Christianity
18.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so it's either, most scholars think there's at least some level of interpolation. Like the whole thing was not the way we read it now is not what was written. So there's at least some degree of interpolation, but a lot of scholars think the whole thing might have been forged.
I think the whole thing might have been forged, and I base it on the fact that Eusebius is citing it and the way he cites it. And Eusebius is like the guy that is he's like the huckster. He's like after Paul, he's like the number one like lying historian or lying Christian.
Yeah, and not only that,
I think we should credit him. I think he should be who credited, not Constantine. Eusebius should be credited with turning the Roman Empire Christian.
I think so too.
Also the big thing though, the reason why scholars think it's a forgery or at the very least interpolated is because Origen writes all this stuff about Josephus, and Origen's writing in like the early 3rd century, and he's like, okay, yeah, he talks about James, the brother of Jesus. Too bad he didn't know anything about Jesus though. Wait, what?
Yeah, he did not mention Jesus our Lord. He says something like that.
He does. So Origen's writing about this book about Josephus' Antiquities, and he seems to have no knowledge.
And listen to this. Eusebius is using the same version of Josephus. This literally the same physical book that he says that it's been passed down from Origen. And then Eusebius later cites Josephus with that passage added on. So I think it was added by Eusebius or him.
And Caesar's Messiah's theory, doesn't he say that he thinks Josephus was involved with writing the Gospels?
Oh yeah.
No, Josephus didn't even know about Christianity. If he wrote the Gospels and he was involved with some conspiracy, he would have sprinkled that in to his Jewish histories. And he would have done it in a more deceptive way, not mention him at all.
There's pseudo Josephus text that people like. Probably some people think Eusebius might have wrote some of them, but We know, well, one of them we have a good idea that it was Hippolytus in the late second century, and it's texts that are saying it's written in Josephus's name, and they're fake. So they were doing shit like this. There's one of them called Against Apion. There's another one called on the concept of the bosom of Abraham, and it's basically like explaining like what did Jesus mean when he said bosom of Abraham, and he's like talking about it's actually a place in Hades, this and that, and then it's like, and then at the end of the letter it's like to our Lord and Savior, Amen, and scholars are like, what the fuck? Josephus did not write this, and then we figured out that it's like almost identical to the way Hippolytus writes.
Right. Sus.
They get caught with this shit all the time. This is the whole first 10 centuries of Christianity is just them like rewriting their history. Like forging manuscripts to write December 25th for Jesus's birthday when older manuscripts had like March 20th or like May 20th or something. They would fix them so that they would all be like, no, we always thought it was December 25th. Like they get caught doing that shit.
Right. All right, so Adam had a good point. So let's break down. So what's the Caesar's Messiah? What's Atwell's theory in a nutshell? Right, it's that the gospel stories about Jesus are basically some sort of like satirical, like mythical code that's throwing these nods and gestures to the war against the Jews. Vespasian and Titus, they become victorious. They're making the Son of Man concept into referring to Titus. It's the idea is that the Gospels are hatched up by the Romans, not the Jews. So maybe it's Jews like Philo or Josephus. Like these are basically like Roman Jews. Like Paul was a Roman citizen and a Jew. Maybe like Jewish turncoats or something like that. But we don't know exactly who and why. But after the destruction of Rome, of Judea, right? The theory that Atwell puts forward is that these books are written 40 years later. They're backdated to be written at the early part of the century, but they're written 40 years later about the things that are, supposed to have transpired early in the century. And the reason for doing it is they're basically creating like a spin-off, like a version of Judaism that's sort of like paganized in a way, like one way of looking at it, because you've got like this idol concept where it's like you're worshiping Jesus on the cross. And then you're doing away with circumcision and the Sabbath and the temple sacrifices, and it's encouraging everybody to just be chill and like do charity and pay your taxes. And it's sort of like an alternative to the revolutionary, maybe like terrorist sort of reactionary Jews that still existed in the region. So the theory would go that Romans hatched up Christianity as a way to sort of undermine Jews who were still going to try to insist on practicing Judaism within Rome, and giving them like a Romanized alternative to Judaism that also we can see. Atwell is saying that he sees fingerprints of some sort of pattern where it's even acknowledging that there's almost like puns, like inside jokes within the scripture that are revealing who made it and why. And he says that it was the Romans. So now we're examining, does that actually hold water? Like, what are the problems with this theory beyond just maybe...
Would the Romans really call their gods and their pagan pantheon demons?
No.
And then start worshiping the Jewish Messiah, which was the whole goal of the Jews to begin with, who they just destroyed? It's
yeah, and another thing, Atwell definitely does this is well, maybe not Atwell. I know the other guy, James Valiant says this. The part where Jesus is given the coin and he says, "Give to Caesar what is Caesar's."
Mm-hmm.
And then he always stops right there and goes, "Do you see how pro-Roman that is? Why would any Jew ever say that?" And it's like, wait, no, keep reading. The next verse is, "And then give to God what is God's." It's literally putting Caesar under God. It's the most anti-Roman thing you can say. It's not pro-Roman. It's a very, very, very cryptic way of saying Caesar is not God. And that's kind of a blasphemous thing to say.
Yeah, and if the Romans wrote it to, sorry to interrupt, but I just did interviews again. I don't know if you heard that part, Neil, but I went and did street interviews about Jesus again yesterday. And I asked people who killed Jesus, and most people say the Romans. If the Romans wrote a story, would they implicate themselves, even if they washed the hands of Pilate? Would they implicate themselves at all of doing the torturing and the crucifixion? I don't think so. And look at what the scholars say today. Like Bart Ehrman says, the only thing we know about Jesus is he was a Jew who was crucified by the Romans. So like if their story to blame them for doing it, even though Pilate's hands are washed, still people are blaming the Romans. So that didn't work out so well.
Yeah, crucifixion is like one of the most like disturbing, like crazy ways to kill somebody, and it's not something you would want to like promote that you do. Like, you know, you see what I'm saying? Like it's very gory and very nasty, very like it's a crazy thing to do. And like if you're gonna create propaganda, you would just be like, and then the Jews took him out and stoned him to death, and you know what I mean? It's something different. I think you're right. I don't think that makes sense.
Which is weird because that's what the Talmud and the Total Yeshu says, is that Jesus was stoned and hung on a tree.
Right. They say that. Yeah, it's crazy.
So you're telling me the Romans, they tell their version of the story and they took the blame for doing it? And then also they say, look how pro-Roman it is. The first believer is the Roman centurion that pierces Jesus and then gets the blood and water on him. And then he's the first believer, right? The first Gentile believer?
Yeah, and that's another thing. Is throughout the text, throughout Acts and the Gospels and throughout they're constantly showing you, look at this great Gentile that left his faith and came to us. It's that they're the ones being psyoped, not the Jews.
Exactly.
The Jews
and this is a story. This is a story for the Romans to adopt. This was meant to appeal to the Romans, not to the Jews.
Yeah. It's always trying to make the Jews look like they're not, like they're losing their own thing. They didn't even recognize their own Messiah, but you Gentiles did. The Gentiles
and the fact that it has some pacifism in it, and it's a pacifist cult.
Yeah.
That gave it a better chance of survival. They were going for the long game, not the military rebellious zealots, because they would be crushed by the Roman Empire, but they kind of go under the radar if they're trying to not cause any problems. Yeah. And also the idea of the crucifixion, if the Romans made that up, you have the whole piercing motif like all throughout Zechariah.
Oh yeah.
It's in Zechariah 12:10, the piercing. It's in Isaiah 53. It's in the Dead Sea Scrolls. This piercing crucifixion thing is not a Roman fabrication. It's a Jewish motif.
And the people that wrote these texts were so aware of all of these Old Testament motifs. All these, like, they were Jews. There's no way around that. Like, they were Jewish scholars that wrote these Gospels. These were not random Romans. Like that's why at least Atwell has to, at least to some degree, like bring in like Philo as like people like Philo who studied these stuff. Because like there's no way that people besides Jews wrote these Gospels. It's fulfilling all these motifs from the Old Testament constantly. Every passage relates back to something from the Old Testament. Everything, the entire thing.
In the earliest layers of the New Testament is Paul. And then in the Gospels, all of that is targeting the Gentile world. That's not propaganda that's meant to convert a bunch of Jews. It's meant to go to the nations. The Great Commission in the Gospels, or Paul is the apostle to the Gentiles, and it's written in Greek. If you're trying to subdue the most extremist, rebellious, messianic movements in Judea, you don't write it in Greek. You would have written it in Aramaic and Hebrew, which is what they were mostly writing about in the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yeah. But like I said in the beginning of this, there is some truth to what he says. Like the only like the idea, like Tiberius Julius Alexander, I mentioned him. This guy was half Jewish, half Egyptian Greek or something. And he was the procurator of Judea in the 40s. While being prefect of Egypt in the 60s. Like he was high level patrician, which was super rare, by the way, for a foreigner to be in those positions. In fact, I'll tell you how rare it was. There's a poem written by Juvenal in the 60s, and he talks about pissing on his statue, Tiberius Julius Alexander, because he was half Jewish. He says to the reader, if you ever see the statue of the prefect of Egypt, you should piss on it because he's not a Roman. That's how rare it was for someone who's not Roman to be in his position. So the point I'm making is there's some truth to what Atwell says, but in the opposite way. There were Jews that were getting high levels in society, and they were gaining influence, and they were pushing their shit on people. They were getting up. They were up there. Julius Alexander, as I mentioned, he's Philo's nephew. So these are not just military men; these are theologians too. And Tiberius Julius Alexander was standing right next to Titus Flavius Vespasian when the temple of Jerusalem was being knocked down. That's how much he didn't care about his own temple. He was one of these type of Jews that cared about the diaspora and the survival of the people in the cities that he cared about. He didn't give a shit about Jerusalem, which is kind of the attitude you get from Christianity. Forget about Jerusalem. Forget about the temple. We want our religion to spread and to take over the world. Like that's kind of what the attitude was. You can see that in Tiberius Julius Alexander and Philo. You know what I mean?
So one thing that the fella brought up to me, he said there's even like a nod maybe in the crucifixion of Jesus, because there's a way of seeing that Judas might be representing Brutus in the Julius Caesar betrayal, and then Cassius Longinus was part of the assassination plot, and then it's a Roman named Longinus who stabs Jesus. So you just reminded me of that with the stabbing part. So
his name is Marcus Junius Brutus, and what he does is you just reminded me. I forgot about this. The front of Junius is a Jew, and the end of Brutus is Udus, so Judas.
Right.
Now it's funny. It's interesting to look at that. It's like, okay, yeah, he's the one that stabbed Caesar in the back, and it's like, okay, you found an interesting parallel there. The only problem with that is in the Old Testament, you do have references to a betrayer, and Judah is the one that portrays Joseph in Genesis. So it would be like, wait a minute, did this really fulfill? Did Marcus Judas Brutus actually fulfill some Old Testament prophecy with Caesar? Like that would be really crazy. And to me, it just looks like the name just happens to have a weird kind of little coincidence in there. It's a very interesting thing he points out there. But like I said, they're not getting that from Brutus. They're getting it from the Old Testament. They're getting it from Judas betraying Joseph for 20 shekels. Judas betrays Jesus for 30 shekels. They both do the same thing. It's just a retelling. Jesus is just playing the role of Joseph. He's the one brother who is chosen by God, which is, in that case, it's Jacob. Jacob is the father. And he chose Joseph to be his favorite son. Well, in the case of the New Testament, Jesus is the favorite son. He's the son of the father, and his brothers, the Jews, Judas, stab him in the back for 30 shekels. So they're just replaying Old Testament motifs. So like if that wasn't in the Old Testament, then I would be more inclined to think that Atwell is right, that they're getting it from Brutus. But the fact that was already there centuries before Brutus existed, then it's just you're out of here. You know what I mean? I already see where the precedent is, and it's in Judas. Judas and Judah are the same person. Like literally, Judas in Greek is Judah in Hebrew. So in the Septuagint, believe it or not, in the Septuagint, which is what Christians would read, Judah is just Judas. You can go back and read the Old Testament. There's a Judas in the Old Testament, and that's Judah.
It's the same word.
Same exact word.
Yeah.
So he's literally doing the same thing. Like the Judas did not exist in history. It's a fake story based on the Old Testament. And that's why I think like he points out that interesting parallel with Junius Brutus, but it's just like, yeah, but that's not where it comes from. It's just like it's an interesting parallel. That's all it really is.
You feel the same about the Longinus thing, like the fact that the Roman soldier who stabs Jesus is Longinus,
the spear of Longinus or whatever.
Yeah, right. So
it's interesting. It is an interesting point.
Yeah,
and I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if there was something, if they did draw some sort of thematic stuff from Caesar, not just Caesar, but Augustus even more, because Augustus was called Son of God. He wrote Gospels, Evangelions that were passed around. And there was like this idea that Augustus was like this savior God. Philo, by the way, we were talking about Philo. in one of Philo's books, he says that Augustus was so divine that he can calm storms and heal the sick. So like this is a Jewish person writing this about a Roman emperor. So I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if there was some things that they were drawing in the Gospels from like the motifs of Augustus and Caesar. I wouldn't be surprised at all. That's why there might be a little bit of truth to what Atwell says.
Yeah, in my view, basically, like those gospels, like they're written by essentially extremely Hellenized Jews. Like today, the type of Jews that we know, that we are all like, oh, these are secular, liberal, left-wing Jews. They are basically like made by the ancient versions of that, right?
Yes.
So so they had not that good Hebrew. Like they had better Greek than they did Hebrew, some of them.
Right.
And this is a perfect
fact.
example. This is Isaiah, right? The Isaiah virgin birth mistranslation. That like pulling I don't want to rehash this wrong or whatever, but basically like Christians say that Jesus was prophesied as a virgin birth in an Isaiah verse that in Hebrew does not mention a virgin. It's mentioning a young woman. And because their Hebrew, their Greek is better than their Hebrew, they like totally miss that. And even in the first century or the second century, Jews are saying this. Like there's a Jewish writer named like begins with the T, like Thios or Thydon. Hold on, let me just.
While you're looking it up, the word they use in Hebrew is alma.
Yeah,
and alma means maiden. And then if they really wanted to say virgin, they could have said Betula.
Exactly.
They say alma. So then the translators translated as Parthenos, which means virgin, not kore, which means maiden. So they mistranslated that verse. So the entire point of Matthew in the virgin birth is based on a mistranslation of the Hebrew.
And so I'm just giving that as an example, right? Because that's just one example, but that right there. So that's why I kind of have an issue with Atwell as well. And I said this to you before, BigTech, but like basically it's the opposite issue essentially. Like these word plays and all these other things. It's almost like they were like shitty Jews that wrote this. Is basically the best way I could describe it. And like there's multiple versions like this.
Yeah, and they even mix up. By the way, Philo does this too. For how educated Philo was, it almost seems like he was a Platonist more than he was a Jew.
Yeah,
his Platonism came first, then his Judaism came second, and he mixed up. He would get like Yom Kippur mixed up with Passover, and he would confuse them and get verses wrong. And this gets reflected in the gospel. So, for example, Jesus is the Passover lamb, right? Everyone knows that. That's like 101 Christianity. Jesus is the Lamb of God, right?
Yeah.
But it describes him in the Yom Kippur as a sin off. The Passover lamb is not a sin offering, right? Most Christians don't know this. Most Christians think it is. Passover lamb is not a sin offering. There is like protection from death, from the angel of death. That doesn't mean sin offering. Sins aren't cleansed. It has nothing to do with sin. The sin offerings from Yom Kippur. And in the Gospels, Jesus is presented with two other criminals. One criminal, I should say, at first. He gets crucified with two other criminals. But in the trial, it's him and Barabbas, I mean. And Barabbas is like a sinful pirate, like thief. He's like, he committed all these crimes and murders, and they let him go. But then Jesus, who's sinless and pure, gets crucified, and he becomes the sin offering. That's Yom Kippur. In Yom Kippur, they take two goats. One of them is unblemished and pure. That one gets sacrificed. And then the other one that's like dirty and like not blemished, that one gets let go. And that's the sin off. And that's the one that they still let the sins go. So Jesus being a sin offering and sort of, they don't even get Yom Kippur completely correct either. They mix up. The sin offering is the one they let go, not the one they sacrifice. So they get that wrong, and then they confuse it with the Passover lamb. They're mixing up there's like three or four different festivals they're combining into one there, or they're just getting it wrong. So that just shows you these are not temple Jews. These are like outsiders living in Alexandria or Antioch, Syria. They're educated, but they're Greek. They're speaking Greek and shit. You know what I mean? And
I just found it. It's Trypho the Jew. In Justin
yeah.
Martyr's dialogue with
Yeah, yeah.
Trypho. So this is 2nd century, 150-160 CE. In that, they basically he directly refers, arguing that Isaiah 7:14 refers to a young woman, not a virgin, and the prophecy was fulfilled in Hezekiah's birth or another contemporary event from the time it was written. Also, right. So while Justin's work is Christian, it reflects the Jewish arguments in the 2nd century. So the reason I'm saying this is basically like the Jews at the time, like what I would say is like the more conservative or orthodox or like rabbinical Jews or proto-rabbinical Jews, they're all making these exact critiques of those Jews. They're basically like, you guys are shitty at Hebrew, basically, is what they're saying to them.
Yeah, definitely.
By the way,
Another thing, Philo
in other
messes
news,
up, too.
I'll report real quick. I'm getting reports, live breaking reports that at Grok, the Grok AI on X just got banned.
I saw that.
I wonder if we're having
I was
a
trying
mega
to use it
Hitler
earlier and it
too.
wasn't working. I wonder if that was what.
Was it glitching out again and doing some Nazi shit again?
Maybe
Is that
we might have a
happened?
Hitler 2 happening.
Wait, I'm looking at Grok with 5.8 million followers and it's still alive. It's still up right now.
Are we getting
Is it a different
psyoped? Let me see.
Maybe click on the account again and it might disappear.
I'm,
Hey guys, I have another thought that I think just blows a huge hole in the Caesar's Messiah theory. Can I
Looks
share
like
real
it's
quick?
Still there. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, the theme of the Messiah in Judaism is clearly all about conquering the nations of the world and all the gods of the world. There's even a well, actually, that's pretty late. I won't mention that, but you guys agree with that. That's the theme: Yahweh, the God of Israel, conquering the pagan idols. In Christianity, it's the pagan demons. So you're telling me that the Romans created this as a psyop to subdue Messianic Jews, but then it immediately, like right at the inception, backfired and only started to convert Gentiles away from their gods to worship, in fulfilling Jewish prophecy, to worship the Jewish Messiah and the God of Israel? Do we really think the Romans are that inept that they would go for this psyop that would backfire just immediately in such a devastating way? Or did some myth makers just develop this Son of Man, suffering Messiah motif into something and then packaged it for the Gentiles and then had their God conquer the world like they always wanted? What's more likely?
What was your support for the argument that it happened right away and started backfiring?
Paul, the earliest that we know of Christianity, Paul, which is pre-temple destruction, is the apostle to the Gentiles. And it's clear to see how the way that they derived what Christianity was and what they knew about Jesus. Hold on. The way they derived what they knew about Jesus was from Scripture. And you can see in the Scriptures clearly all the ones that they cited to go to the Gentiles. The Messiah is supposed to be rejected by his people and go to the Gentiles. That's the theme. So why would the Romans create that theme? The Jews are supposed to be hardened and stumble and blinded. That's not how the Romans are going to persuade Jews to believe in Jesus. It's the exact opposite.
I don't know. I don't know if that argument, that doesn't blow my mind. Because look, if you're going to argue against the theory, you have to engage the theory for what it is. And the theory as it's stated disregards the idea that Paul is the apostle to the Gentiles. Like, this theory is sort of like the Christian concept. That's like the Christian, that's what they say. So this sort of like throws that out. So you can't really use that as an argument against it, right? Like, they don't say Paul's the apostle to the Gentiles. It's saying Paul is the apostle to the early church, and Gentile really meant something like to the churches outside of Judea, which included new converts outside of Judaism, outside of the ethnic Jews. But really, it's understood that who he'd be writing to was Jews in these Roman regions.
No, dude, we went over that verse.
Which one are you talking
about? We went over that verse. He's speaking, the context in every time is he's speaking to Gentiles that have to be grafted in. Jews that just fell away aren't wild branches that need to be grafted in. He's talking about the non-Jewish world.
Yeah.
So if the whole argument depends on that, then it's toast. And you implied that I'm not arguing in good faith on what their argument is. Yes, I am. And
not that it's not
they're
good faith.
saying the
It's just
Romans
like
created it, and every single little signature is about this is for the Gentiles, and the Jews are supposed to reject it until the end time.
I'm not saying that it's not good faith. I'm saying it's a failure to do an internal critique. Like a strong argument against is to like take it for what it is, but not and to like avoid making it into a straw man or including things that they don't take into evidence because. Like if you just hand wave dismiss, like no, it can't be that.
He's going to the uncircumcised. He's going to the wild branches. We went through that verse that they claim makes it. Paul is not speaking to Jews that just fell away from Judaism. That's not what it is. You really had to read into it with that one scripture that the Black Hebrew Israelites or Caesar's Messiah cites. And even without Paul, the Gospels are just expanding on the theme of Paul. They're Pauline in nature, and it has the Great Commission going to the Gentiles. And what about the point that if the Romans created this conspiracy and it immediately only Gentiles started to convert, or primarily Gentiles started to convert, and then they're conquering the pagan gods of Rome and having them worship the Messiah and the God of Israel, like that was the whole agenda of the Jews, not the Romans.
Look, if I was arguing their side, and I'm not trying to get into a debate with you, but I could just like smoke you on a couple of things you said right there, Adam, because I think you're like setting yourself up actually with weak arguments. Like, for example, if you say, the Great Commission, go into all the Gentiles, that's not really what it says right there. He's saying go into these towns, and then he goes on to say go into all the nations, which could mean go into all the regions outside of Judea. But he's talking to the evangelists who are saying to go into these different villages, and those who accept you, share the gospel with them.
Dude, it's 70 disciples. This Great Commission is 70 disciples, meaning going to the 70 nations.
That's from Luke, right? Luke 70. Let's see what it says. Luke says,
everything's 70 in the Bible.
After this,
70 is like
the
their
Lord
special number.
appointed 72.
So I guess you
Romans
didn't
say
smoke
70.
me with my bad argument then.
Well, you didn't
because
even
it
hear
is
me
about
out.
going to the Gentiles.
You actually
the
just
nations
shouted
is
over
the
me.
non-Jews.
You actually
Let me
just
read
shouted over me and didn't listen.
Hold on, let me read it. It says the Lord appointed, the manuscripts say either 70 or 72 others, and sent them two ahead of him to every town and place where he was about to go. He told them, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore go out, send all the workers to the harvest field. So there were 70. It doesn't really say where.
So
Wait, I'm trying to figure out what are you saying that it isn't besides go out to the Gentiles?
When he's training the evangelists, like the context is he's telling them to go into these different villages, right, share the gospel. And he says, those who receive you, stay with them and teach them whatever. Those who don't, just dust your shoes off and move on. But is he talking about going into neighborhoods, right, of like Greek pagans and sharing the gospel? Who among them would even receive it that way? Wouldn't it make sense that he's talking about going to Jews and letting them know that their Messiah has come? Doesn't that make the most sense? That's who they would be.
He says he's going to the Greeks. Paul says that the Jews looked for a sign. Yes. Christ crucified was the Jews were looking for a sign.
Hold on, I'm talking about the Great Commission. I'm talking about Jesus training the evangelists, not Paul.
I know. I'm going back to the Great Commission in a second.
Oh,
because it does. They did say this is later tradition, obviously, but pretty early on, they start telling that these 70 disciples are the ones that founded all of the churches in Greece and Rome and Antioch. So in Paul's letters, for example, in Romans, he lists off like 40 people in Romans 16, Romans 16, the chapter. And the church would say that those are the people that Jesus sent out in Luke.
Right.
So that doesn't mean that the author of Luke meant that, but I'm just saying that's the only context we really have about where they went.
I want to go back to the Great Commission, but also another point that came to mind. In 1 Corinthians, Paul says, for Jews demanded signs and Greeks desire wisdom, but we proclaim Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and a foolishness to Gentiles. So clearly he's associating Gentiles with Greeks. So the Greeks aren't, we're not talking Jews, we're talking Greek, pagan Greeks, pagan Rome. That's who he's teaching Christ crucified to.
Here's the thing you got to remember too.
It's both.
Paul's letters are before the Gospels, unless we accept Nina Knives, but I'm not quite there yet. Right now,
and Luke and Acts might as well be like the Gospel of Paul, sort of, right? Because Acts is basically like Luke Part 2, and it's all about Paul and his.
It's either
Peter and Paul.
Yeah, it knows.
Yeah, but I think Luke is just copying Matthew and Mark's the original.
Right, but he's saying like from the data from Paul, you get a lot of stuff in Luke.
Yeah.
But anyways, the point is like for the 70, the one I just mentioned, the 70 disciples, where does that come from? Romans 16. Romans 16 lists off all these people that Paul's writing to. This is what it says. It literally goes, meet Prisca, Aquila, Mary, Andronicus, Junia, Ampliatus, Urbanus, Apelles, Herodian, who he calls my fellow Jew or my kinsman, Narcissus, Tryphena, Tryphosa, Persis. These are all Greek names, by the way. Hermes, Petrobus, Hermas, Philologus, Nereus, Olympus. Those are so.
Yeah, so they were just stealing all the pagan gods, so the pagan gods would follow these disciples.
Well, what I'm saying is these people were sent out to.
You think you're converting Jews with those pagan names as the disciples? No, they're targeting pagans.
Well, it is more nuanced than that, though. I agree with you. I agree with you, Adam. But in these cities that they're going to, there was Jewish synagogues there that were mixed. They were like.
Right.
They're like, so there were Jews in these cities, but there's also pagans too. So they're going out. Paul's sending people out there to these cities to try to get people to join. And there's also Jewish synagogues out there too. It's kind of both.
Well, it's like in Acts 18 when Paul he goes and he's like going up to the Jews and he's trying to preach to them, and the Jews like kick him out and they're all mad at him, and he gets all, and then he goes out to the Gentiles and he's like, well, if these Jews won't listen, then I'm gonna talk to the Gentile. It's like very cartoony, right? Like this is like a Disney movie.
And that's exactly what's going on. It's like he's like trying to get to these Jews too, but like apparently they weren't listening.
I'm just saying. I guess the point I'm making, I guess, is that like to what degree there was an attempt to take the message to Jews, it always fails in Luke Acts.
Yeah. Which I don't know if that's really true. I would guess that he probably got tons of Jews in these cities.
I think it's just all polemic. The more I read Nina, the more I think she's just right, and it's all just a novelization of what's going on.
Yeah.
So that brings me to, I'm trying to wrap my head around what is our theory, even if it's got some holes in it, like, early evolutionary theory, like Darwin might have noticed the beaks on the finches and came up with a hunch of like how things are going with the selection of like natural selection, survival of fittest kind of thing. And then it's over the subsequent generations, right? Decades and then centuries that we get more fossil records. We get like a more nuanced taxonomy of like how the different, the zoology of, these lines led to these different species. We start getting a more comprehensive view of how evolution could have occurred. But at the beginning, it's still very rudimentary. And so we might be somewhere between the very beginning and a full understanding of how this all came together. So it's, in my view, it's okay to acknowledge that there might be some kind of gaps in the theory that are looking to still be filled in with further exploration and everything. But where does it stand now, even if it's not a totally complete theory? This is the question I want to pose, because I'm understanding that some of us in the room are more of a fan of like Carrier's form of mythicism, where maybe there's like an Essene or sort of like the cosmic Jesus cult that led into this thing. And then some of us are rejecting that for certain, to one degree or another for their reasons. And that makes me think like, all right, if Paul is at that time before the destruction of the temple, there's already a bunch of churches built up where he's evangelizing the Gentiles. So then how did that really kick off? Like, how does it become popular? what is the theory? Is Paul doing like traveling salesman type of stuff, and he's just going town to town, and he's just showing up where the pagans are and being like, "What's up, guys? Let me tell you about."
That's why I was trying to say it's more nuanced than what Adam's saying. Like when they go into these places that they're going to already had existing synagogues of people who were like Philo, like these were Greek speaking Jewish people,
right?
Who like they read the Septuagint and they didn't really care about what was happening in Jerusalem that much, but they did send money to Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
That was part of their thing. Like we know from all the sources that Jerusalem was the number one city that knew how to collect money from other cities other than Rome. Like Rome is looking at, like there's sources where like Augustus was like, damn, these fucking Jews know how to raise money and send it back. Like there was people complaining about that. Like, why are you letting them send money to their city? Why don't you why don't we just tax them more? And like he was like, no, we need that's our border. Like we got to make sure that we keep them happy over there. There's a bunch of politics involved, and like the situation of how Jerusalem would raise all this money from all these cities that were in the Roman Empire. And he was basically saying, as long as they pay the taxes that we want, they can send as much money as they want over to Jerusalem. But the point I'm making is we know from those sources that there was a network of what was called ecclesias or assemblies, and they had synagogues there. And they were like Greek speaking Jews that were like, they were into Plato and they were into Pythagoras. And they would make up stories that Pythagoras was actually a Jew, stuff like that. And those are the people who were they were like mingling with Gentiles. These people were called Hypsisterians. And if you look up Hypsisterians, these were like pagans that were worshiping one God without images. Like they were like iconoclast pagans. And they were like really fascinated with Judaism. And like these people are mingling. And there's a whole book called Christ Associations by John Kloppenborg, where he shows like they were basically like groups of pagans and Jews like dwelling together in all these big urban cities. And that's sort of the crowd that Paul is looking for. They're trying to get Gentiles, obviously, but they're also looking for those little places that turn them. Those are the first places they turn Christian, for sure, in my mind. You get the synagogues to flip, and then you turn that into a Christian church, and then you start taking Gentiles. That's how it works.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Like that's why I'm saying it makes sense that even if we're saying Paul is an apostle to the Gentiles, in a way it's kind of both, right? So he's writing to these Jews that are in Roman province, like pagan areas, and maybe they're even, like you said, there's ecclesia, there's churches that are coming out of the synagogue that are sort of, like you said, they're sort of like Philo, where they're studied, they are Jewish, they are Judeans that are outside of Judea that are becoming more like the philosophers, right? They're becoming more paganized or Hellenized. So there's already sort of like some sort of hybrid Jew out there that's where the church is originating from, is those little regional gatherings, right?
Yeah.
And yeah.
Like
and so,
in Rome, there was this giant ecclesia there. And where it came from is back when Pompey raided Jerusalem in 64 BC, he took a bunch of Jewish slaves back with him to Rome. And they were like the slaves. They were the slave class. They were the ones that like worked the concrete, and they did the wood, they did like the carpentry, and they were the slaves. And then eventually over time, you start getting a population of freed slaves, people who earn their way out, whether they joined the military or they did something to earn their freedom. And there was in Rome a whole quarter, like a little ghetto quarter of like freed Jewish slaves. And that became like the big synagogue region of Rome. And we know where it was. We dug up the archaeology. We know exactly where it was. And that area became one of the biggest churches that Peter and Paul were going to in early Christianity, if they were around. Like it was like, we know that place was there. We don't know obviously for sure Peter and Paul went there, but like that would have been the spot that they would have went to. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, that makes sense.
So
Adam,
like basically the way
Go
I would
ahead.
say it is this. You have an existing network of these synagogues from the 1st century BC all the way until 70 AD, right? And like these are like Jewish people who know Greek or Latin or something, and they're like dwelling with pagans and they're dwelling with Romans, and they're just like they're trying to fit in. They're not like really that like fundamentalist. And then they start learning Christianity, and they just completely fling to that. Like they completely it fits them better. So like Atwell's kind of right in a way, but like the only thing about Atwell that I would say that he doesn't take into account is that already started happening before Christianity. They were already starting to act like that. They didn't need to be psyop by Romans. That was like the trend that Judaism was already going in. And then once Paul comes along, Paul is not just going out and like telling them to be Christians. He's trying to sell it to the pagans too. He wants the Gentile. That's why all of Paul's letters, if you read Paul's letters, like especially Corinthians and especially Galatians, he's obsessed with telling these people that to not worry about the law. Don't even get circumcised. Don't even care about baptism. Who cares about meat sacrificed to idols? Just be a Christian and just give us your tithes. Like that's all he cared about, because he's trying to get more people to join. So, which means he's trying to get Gentiles to join.
Yeah. Right.
That's how I would describe it. What do you think about that, Adam?
Yeah. What do you think? Well,
No, he's bounced.
we might not still have him.
I only heard of the last few seconds of that, but I think it'd be cool maybe if we can go through some of the supposed proofs of the Flavian signature, as Atwell calls it, of how these Son of Man passages are supposedly coded satire about the conquering of Jerusalem. Maybe some of that. Also, BigTech, maybe, since you mentioned I don't know how central this is to the whole theory, but you mentioned the thing about Paul referring to Gentiles, and they think that, does Atwell say Gentiles are actually Jews that just stopped following Judaism in diaspora?
No, I don't think that comes from Atwell.
Okay. So
Atwell does say that there's a typology going on between Josephus and the Gospels.
Yeah, like maybe show some of the best examples of that to see, how credible and sound his proofs are here about what the Son of Man stuff. Because the Son of Man, every time I see the Son of Man mentioned in Mark, it's just a straight reference to the Old Testament Son of Man.
Well, another thing that I forgot to, I don't know how we all forgot to mention this. Atwell brings up these passages. I think it's in Tacitus and Suetonius, where it talks about, like, there is an actual, I forgot where it is now. I have to find it. I'll find it in a second. But there is an actual passage that does like sort of hint at the idea that Titus sacking Jerusalem was this prophesied thing from Numbers of the star that will come for Jacob. Like there's some sort of reference. I think it's in Suetonius or something. It's been such a while since I looked at all this stuff, but I'm gonna find it in a second, where there is it basically like hints at it might be towards Titus being the Son of Man. And then on top of that, in the Talmud, there's the whole thing about Yohanan ben Zakkai running out of Jerusalem to meet with Vespasian, and he's like, "You're the chosen one," basically. Now he never says the word Messiah there, but there's people like Atwell and others have been like, "See, look, even they admit this."
Is it Josephus said that too? When he was conquered, he was the leader of Galilee, and he was conquered by the Romans, and he told Vespasian that he's the Messiah that was meant to come and conquer the world.
He doesn't say Messiah though. He never says that. Yeah, he says he does kiss up to him, calls him like the king, all that stuff. Like it does seem like there's something going on with that. So that's why Atwell kind of points at that stuff and goes, "Look, we see it. It's being hinted at." Like he just takes it to a little bit more of a degree. Let me try to find that real quick. What do you think about that, though? BigTech?
Well, yeah, I don't. Back to the thing about I don't think Atwell says. Yeah, I haven't come across him saying that Gentiles meant Jews outside of Judea, but it's probably something more like what you were saying there on that. As far as the Son of Man stuff goes, look, I haven't read Atwell's books yet. Like I'm not even there yet. I just started going through them. But what I'm only familiar with them basically by the videos that are presented by people who are reviewing the stuff on YouTube, and then I've also been reading critiques of it too from the other side. Yeah. And I'm sort of caught in between. Like both sides have their points. You know, it's funny that this the character in my chat, we call him Large Small. That's his handle, right? His screen name. He's all in on this, and what he said, he characterized that there's people out there that think that Carrier is kind of like he's like the flat earther of the mythicist community or something like that, where his some of his theories are considered fringe and unaccepted. Maybe he's making some correlations about things that aren't real, and he's sort of like whatever. This is what he was saying with regard to maybe like the Jesus from outer space stuff or something like that. This is his view.
I wouldn't call him a flat earther, but I do. But there are some times where he gets a little bit like carried away. Like in his books are fine. His books are all peer reviewed and they're all fine. And then he'll get like he'll get in these speeches in front of atheists, and he did this like 10 times in front of an atheist crowd where he made this claim. I'm not kidding. It wasn't a one-time slip. He claimed that when I called him out for it, but he said Philo Judaeus was a Jew who lived in the 1st century, who worshipped an angel named Jesus, who was. Then he starts listing off all like the Son of Man, and he was this, that, and third. And I asked him. I go Carrier.
Where's he getting that from?
Literally, it doesn't exist. It's not. It's made up. And me and him had a talk one time. I can show you the video of it.
Hold on, Neil. It's not completely made up, though. Philo does talk about a logos character, and right in the same passage, right in the same verse, it says Joshua, the crowned high priest.
No, it doesn't. Those are 2 different books from Philo. He doesn't say logos at all when he talks about when he talks about Zechariah's, there's no logos in there. What Carrier does is he takes one book from Philo that mentions the logos and all that stuff.
What verse is he talking about when he mentions the logos, though?
Philo mentions the logos all the time.
The one that Carrier references, it's not connected to Zechariah?
Never says Zechariah is the logos, ever. And he doesn't even say Jesus in there. He just talks about there being, he just mentions that verse, and then goes on.
It's because the branch in Zechariah 3 and 6 is called Joshua the high priest, so he connects Philo to that Zechariah verse. I'll have to go.
Yeah, but that's the name of the high priest in Joshua. What Carrier did, though, he didn't write this in his book because it would have failed peer review. Or else why wouldn't it be in there? He went 10 different times. I counted. I have 10 different videos of him doing this. He told these atheists that Philo. He literally says, literally named Jesus. Because Philo's angel was literally named Jesus, when Philo never said that. That's my one beef with Carrier. And when I met with Carrier after my video, we were talking. We were still friends, and I said, "Dude, I like a lot of this stuff in my. You have to at least admit that was wrong." And he said, "You're right, but that was only a one-time thing." So he admitted it was wrong. And then he said it was only a one-time slip-up. This is what he told me. And then I went back later and I found 10 more examples of him saying it in front of people. So he just lied to my face that day. That's my one beef with Carrier. Other than that, I think he's fine. I don't think he's a flat earther. I think his books are fine. I have no problem with them. That's my one beef with Carrier.
Well, the reason I brought the flat earther thing is because while that's that label's being sort of like thrown at him by this character who's been sharing with me his affinity for the Atwell stuff. When I'm looking into the rebuttals of Atwell, it actually seems like the shoe might be on the other foot. Like what they're saying about Atwell's mythicism is that it's a lot of sort of like flat earth tier logic where you're doing like straight up blatant word concept fallacies, taking things totally out of context. Like, for example, like a flat earther will say, sea level right? So that means like the sea is always flat or something. It's like, no, sea level is altitude.
I found the most important Roman providence passage of all time. Just found it. This needs to be said because some Atwell fans going to hate us for not bringing this up. We have to bring it up. It's from Tacitus, book 5, chapter 13. And he writes, prodigies indeed occurred, but to avert them either by victims or by vows is held unlawful by people which, though prone to superstition, is opposed to all propitiatory rites. Contending hosts were seen meeting in the skies. Arms flashed. Suddenly the temple was illumined. This is talking about Jerusalem, by the way. So I just forgot to say. He's talking about the 70 AD. All right. Suddenly the temple was illumined with fire from the clouds. Of a sudden the doors of the shrine opened up, and a superhuman voice cried, the gods are departing. At the same moment, the mighty stir of their going was heard. Few interpreted these omens as fearful. The majority firmly believed that their ancient priestly writings, talking about the Bible, the Old Testament, contain the prophecy that this was the very time when the East, talking about the numbers thing, should grow strong, and the men starting from Judea should possess the world. This mysterious prophecy had in reality pointed to Vespasian and Titus.
Whoa.
But the common people, as is the way of human ambition, interpreted these great destinies in their own favor and could not be turned in truth even by adversity. So that they love this. They love this. They think this proves the whole thing. I don't. I'm going to tell you why.
Damn, if I was in love with that theory, I'd be pointing at that one as a smoking gun.
Of course. I got to bring it up because they'll think I'm biased if I don't. Because this is Tacitus, and he's kissing up to his emperor. He's basically saying all these stupid prophecies that the Jews had, really it's to our guy. Now, that sounds like, okay, I'm doing special pleading, but like, think about all the evidence as a whole. This one passage still does not make any sense. That like this is we're talking the 2nd century now. Nothing like this was ever written in the 1st century when Titus was still around, and as I mentioned about Trajan not knowing who the Christians were, there's just it doesn't all add up. Like, this is interesting, don't get me wrong, and then if you couple that with what the Talmud says, the Talmud has this one rabbi running out of the Temple of Jerusalem meeting up with Vespasian saying that he's the chosen king. Like, okay, there's some interesting things that Atwell is pointing out. I just don't think there's enough. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's definitely interesting.
All right. Well,
it just doesn't get you there, though. It just doesn't get me to go, okay, this means that all these texts are about Vespasian and Titus now. It just doesn't get me there. There's just not enough there. You know?
Yeah, the Son of Man in Judaism is about conquering the Gentile kings of the world. That's the Son of Man role.
But Tacitus acknowledges that, because he even says, I'm just playing Atwell advocate here, because he says the ancient priestly writings contain the prophecy that at this very time the East would grow strong and the men from Judea would possess the world. He literally says that. And then exactly after that, he goes, this mysterious prophecy in reality points to Vespasian and Titus. So he acknowledges that. But to your point, though, Adam,
it sounds like he's just saying that the Jewish prophecy failed and that the Romans are ruling things. Exactly. So the Jews didn't get their Messiah. The Romans, sorry, your prophecy failed. We're ruling shit. That's kind of what it sounds like to me.
Think about when this is written. This is right before Bar Kokhba. Things are heating up. This guy they hate the Jews. Tacitus, in the same exact book, I'm not kidding, this is the same exact book, a couple chapters previous to this, he's talking so much shit about the Jews in this book. Basically saying they're just a bunch of like donkey worshiping idiots. So there's no way that he would ever give them any credit for anything. And this is like a slap to their face. You guys thought you had prophecies that were going to that you would be right? No, think again. It's actually about our Caesars. That's what he's doing. That's what he's doing here.
Right.
So like, yeah. So if you obviously need this for Atwell to be correct, like this is very necessary for his theory. But like I said, it's not enough. It doesn't overturn all the other conflicting counter evidence. It doesn't, like, think about Revelation. Revelation is the most anti-Roman book ever. It's about Rome falling. The two beasts are Nero and fucking Caligula.
Right.
That's not. They want Rome to fall. The Christians hate Rome. They are not pro-Roman. Period. There's just like this one passage in Tacitus does not counter all the counter evidence against this theory, in my opinion.
So could it be that, so if we were reaching for a way to synthesize that, if there was something to it, would they maybe like want to bargain and go, okay, well, perhaps the Christians were anti-Rome, and that's reflected in Revelation. It's also in, Paul's writings. We see that there were these ecclesiastia that were in these different cities, and they were clearly Jews that were outreaching to Gentiles. So there was a Jewish evangelism to the non-Jews going on, and that was all existing. And then around this time, there was the sacking of Judea and Jerusalem and all that. And then perhaps the Gospels, like these plays that were then written, were sort of like, with what we just heard there, with the acknowledgement, there was anti-Jewish sentiment. We're hearing from Tacitus that, we don't like the Jews. They're trying to interpret their prophecies one way, and maybe we're seeing there like the kindling of the spark of the concept. Like, well, what if we take this thing that already exists? So it's not so much that the Romans invented Christianity, like started it all up, or that Paul was some sort of like agent of theirs, but maybe there was an attempt to sort of like steer the development of this thing that was already going on, that was anti-Roman, and try to like make it a little bit more amenable to Rome, where it's pacifistic. It's just Jesus is coming back. Trust the plan. It's all chill. Do charity. Do good works. Forgive each other. Do your religion to God, but pay your taxes to Caesar. And maybe pacifying these Jews. Or no, maybe or do you think that it's probably not really so much of a synthesis?
No, well, I don't think there's pacifying Jews is like something that even needed to be done, because the zealot sect was like so tiny, and no one liked them, and they don't even have.
And all they did was get Jews killed and get them crushed.
Yeah,
that's why
no one even liked them.
Yeah, that's not a Roman subversion to suppress Messianic Jews. That's just Jews saying, "Hey guys, like stop getting us killed by the Romans, and try not to cause too much trouble."
The people that were writing the Gospels and the Jews that were like passing down their text and rewriting text, they were already acting like that. They were already like late Hellenistic or Roman era Judaism was already pacifistic in its the way it was. Like Philo, I keep going back to Philo because he's the prime example. If they needed to be if they needed to be pacified so badly, how does Philo even become so like well known and popular and high up? Like he's like completely like it's like reading a Christian when you read him. It's just like I look at him as the first Christian, really.
Yeah, and he's well before any of the stuff. So it was a school of thought that was it was pre-existent. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the big thing for me of why Roman Providence doesn't make sense. As we already mentioned Hillel. You got Hillel, you got Aristobulus, you got Philo. There's a whole bunch of Alexandrian Jews that are like this, and they're already acting like Christians already. Way before Paul, way before the Gospels, they're already acting like this.
Guys, we all know what Philo says and how similar it is to Jesus, but I think a lot of the audience doesn't know. So I just pulled up Raphael Lataster's little section on Philo's pre-Christian and pre-Pauline celestial Christ. Let me just read just one small paragraph here so
Nice.
people see how similar it is. By the way, Philo would have been in the perfect position to know about Jesus and Christians, doesn't know anything about it, but he is describing a logos figure that is a celestial figure called the Logos, which he equates with Sophia wisdom, the
Right.
giver of knowledge, the savior to many Jews. This Logos figure is variously described by the allegorically inclined and Platonist Philo as the firstborn son of God, the celestial image of God, God's agent of creation, and God's high priest. All things the earliest Christians also believed of Jesus. This is why he says Philo is the first Christian.
I would
Because
even go
that
farther. I would even go farther than that. There's also passages in Philo where he talks about the kingdom of heaven being inherited, it being like passed down from father to son to his Logos. He says the Logos will inherit the kingdom of heaven, which is very Christian. And you can find like little Trinitarian, little proto-Trinitarian bits in Philo where he talks about God having a nature of three. And he says God is corporal, incorporeal, and spiritual. And he says that the incorporeal God is like completely unknowable, perfect. It's the Father, he says. And then he says the Logos is the corporal God who inherits matter, which is like, okay, the Son inherits flesh. That's matter. You can already see it. And then the spiritual aspect, he says, is a mediator between the two. So he's already, Philo was already a Trinitarian 300 years before the Trinitarians were already a thing. So I would even go farther than Lattister. I would say it's even more than that. But yeah, that's a good point, though. He mentions the Logos like 500 times in his writings, too. I remember somebody was trying to argue with me the other day. They were like, you always talk about Philo's Logos. He barely even says that. And I'm just thinking, you never read Philo then. Because you cannot go a page on Philo's writings without
I had somebody say I had somebody say like Philo only writes about major events, and I was like, he like literally like writes paragraphs about the grass, dude. Like you've never read it.
Yeah, he's just a hardcore theologian. That's all he's writing about is theology and philosophy.
Well, no, I'm saying he's writing the descriptions when on his trip to Jerusalem. The whole thing is like describing every little detail of the entire physical. Like the idea that he's just writing theology is not true. He's describing the world, his contemporary world, in like all of its physical things.
Yeah, he talks about political events that are happening in the 30s. So he's mentioning the governor of Judea in the 30s. He's talking about like all these things that are happening in the 30s, and he never mentions Jesus once.
He's got like 70 volumes or whatever it is, like just talking about all this stuff in Jerusalem. Yeah,
he's mentioning all the political events and factions that are happening in Judea and in Syria and in Alexandria, and it's like, what? And then you forgot about the guy that was performing miracles? You forgot that one? Like, really? It's like it's such a hard strike against the historicity of Jesus. It really is. That Philo doesn't know who he is. And even if there was just rumors, he doesn't even have to believe it. You would think he would say something. He just says nothing.
Well, he spent time with the Essenes as well, right? So like we know that he literally talks about how he's living with the Essenes or whatever.
No, that's Pliny. Pliny's
is that Pliny?
Pliny's the one who met them. Yeah, he never meets them. He mentions them. Philo does mention them. He compares them to the Therapeuti. But Pliny, that's another point though. Pliny was traveling around Judea right before he died, like 2 years before he died. He was in that part of the world, and he's talking about people that were supposedly worked miracles and people who were considered to be divine men. And I met with these Essenes too, and these Essenes are pretty cool. This is what they showed me. And then he never says anything about Jesus. He's already like, you're on the subject of divine men and miracle workers and the Essenes, and you know Jesus. Like, what? Really? And he wrote, and that was in the 70s when he wrote that. 70s. There could have been like a whole 3 or 4 decades that he could have found out about that. He never found out about it. So that's pretty bad.
You know what, Neil? I just looked it up, and I think what you said earlier is actually wrong. Philo does interpret Zechariah 6:11-12, where it says, "Take the silver and gold and make a crown, set it on the head of the high priest Joshua. Tell him, this is what the Lord Almighty says. Here is the man whose name is the branch."
Yeah.
And then he'll build the temple of the Lord. That branch he calls the Logos. Philo does connect that branch to the
in
logos.
another book, though. I said that in other books.
Okay.
But I don't think so.
But
Does he
still,
call
if he
the branch
considers the branch the logos, the branch right there is
I don't
called
know if he
Joshua.
calls the branch the logos. He mentions the logos as like a divine figure, though.
That's what I just read.
Where does he call the branch the logos? It's in a different. If he does, it's in a different book. Is what I'm saying.
What does that matter if he identifies the branch as the logos? That means when he reads this passage, he thinks the branch. I'll find the exact one that he's reading here in a second. I'm looking for it. But what I just read says Zechariah is not a prophecy about an earth. Philo says Zechariah 6 is not a prophecy about an earthly king, but as an allegory, seeing its branch as the rising from the east as a manifestation of God's logos, the divine Son. So that would be.
Does he say that though, or is that what
I'm getting the exact quote?
Yeah, because I don't know. Vladister and Carrier love to push that. Like they love to push the boundary on that shit a little bit. But like I want to find something because when he's talking about the logos, he's talking about like the word of God is like a very specific thing. And then the branch, like I don't know if Philo thought the Messiah was going to be God. I think he separated those two. I think he separated the Messiah from the logos, and then the Christians took those and put them together. But I don't know. The point that I was making is Philo, and this is another point against that though. There's another point against that. Philo mentions the name of Jesus in another book, and he's talking about because it's a book about names, on names. And he's like Moses, this is what Moses means, and this is what Jacob means, and this is what. Then he gets to Joshua, and he's like Joshua is a great name, and it means salvation of the Lord. That would have been the perfect time for Philo to go. It's also the name of the logos, and then and this I just remembered now. He says that the branch, or he says that the logos, I forgot if it's the branch or the angel. He says, it's the angel. He says the angel has many names, not one name, not Jesus. He says the angel has many names.
Yeah, like the branch, the star, the son of man, the servant.
Yeah, but Philo never says that the angel's name is Jesus, though. That's the point that I'm trying to make.
Right. He doesn't explicitly say that, but in the same passage where he says the branch is the logos, it says that the crowned one there is Joshua. That's the connection. Carrier could have needed to word it a little better to not get hung up on that.
They both get crowned on that. Here's the problem with that. They both get crowned. Joshua gets crowned with silver, and then Zerubbabel gets crowned with gold. And there's an angel there. That angel is not those are two humans, but the angel is the divine one. So the divine messenger, who could be the logos in that situation, isn't Joshua or Zerubbabel. It's neither of them. And then Carrier just wants to like make it Joshua because then it's like game over. We got him. Like he just wants to he wants to force his hand a little bit. It seems like. I could pull the passage up if you want. It's what is it called? It's called which Philo book is that?
Let me see here. I
can find it. It's
You have Philo's writings? You have that book?
Yeah. Here it is right here. It's called On the Confusion of Tongues.
On Confusions of Tongue, right.
Behold, a man whose name is the East. A very novel appellation indeed, if you consider it as spoken of a man who is compounded of body and soul. But by the way, this is another problem with Carrier's theory. The man whose name is the East is not Joshua. It's Zerubbabel. You want to know why I know that? Zerubbabel is the one who came from the East, and he's the line of David. Joshua's from the line of Aaron. So the theory falls apart if you just dig a little bit into it. Zerubbabel's name means seated in Babylon. That's what he was named at. And after Cyrus let the Jews back to Jerusalem, they chose Zerubbabel to be the governor, not king. They chose him to be the governor because he was from the line of David. And if you look at Jesus' genealogy in Luke and in Matthew, Zerubbabel is in the genealogy of Jesus. So when Philo says, behold, a man whose name is the East, he's not talking about Joshua here. He's talking about Zerubbabel. But anyways, let me keep going. A very novel appellation indeed, if you consider it as spoken of a man who is compounded of body and soul, but if you look upon it as applied to the incorporeal being, within no respect differs from the divine image, You will then agree that the name of the East has been given to him with great felicity, for the Father of the universe has caused him to spring up as the eldest son, whom in another passage he calls the firstborn, and who is thus born, imitating the ways of his father.
Dude, Zechariah 6:11-12, it says that Joshua the high priest is the branch. It says this is the man who is the branch.
Yes.
So you just said it wasn't, though. You said the branch was Zerubbabel.
That's in Zechariah, though.
Right. Zechariah 6:11.
But
the branch is Joshua. And Philo thinks the branch is the Logos and the firstborn son. So that's how you get the connection between
the branch. Hold on. Zechariah, which one is it? Zechariah 6:12?
6:11-12.
He says, okay, so because here's the problem with that. It's not Joshua. It's not. The branch is not Joshua. It's Zerubbabel. I'm telling you.
How though? It says put the
Zerubbabel
crown on the head of Josh and say to him,
there's two crowns.
Here is the man.
There's two crowns. They both get crowned. Zerubbabel gets crowned, and then if you read the whole book of Zechariah.
Okay, but that doesn't change the fact that the branch is still Joshua. They could still both be crowned.
Not. The branch is Zerubbabel. It's not Joshua.
Dude, in Zechariah 6:11, it says, put the crown on Joshua the high priest. Here is the branch. This is the branch. That's what it says.
They both get crowned. They both get crowned.
They could both be crowned, but that doesn't change that the branch is Joshua.
The silver crown goes on.
If you don't know what's going on and you're not understanding the argument that they're having, you're not alone.
The reason why we know that, earlier in Zechariah,
either.
He goes, look how mighty the mountain is of Zerubbabel. And then he said, Joshua, you are but a plain compared to Zerubbabel. That's what he says to him.
Okay, that doesn't mean that Joshua can't be the branch. He's associated with the branch in that verse.
He's affiliated with it, yeah, but he's not the branch. It's Zerubbabel. I'm telling you. Look at Jesus' genealogy right now.
Well, hold on. It does say, doesn't Zerubbabel build the temple?
Yes.
Because it says right after that, it is he who will build the temple of the Lord.
Did Joshua build the temple? No.
No, that's why.
This is exactly what I said in my video.
But it doesn't even mention Zerubbabel in this
Yes, it does.
verse.
Go read the entire book of Zechariah. Zerubbabel's mentioned like a bunch of times.
No. I know he's mentioned. It's the king and the high priest. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, that was my problem with Carrier. Is he's looking at these verses.
Well, what verse identifies Zerubbabel with the branch, though? Because I see him associated here with Joshua, but I don't.
Zerubbabel is the Davidic line. He's from the line of David. Joshua is not from the line of David. Who is the branch? What does the branch even mean? It means line
the branch of David.
Yes. So it can't be Joshua. It's impossible. Can't be Joshua.
Okay. Now, I understand your logic and how.
Guess what Carrier says to me when I brought this up?
Yeah.
But Philo's wrong. He mistakenly thought it was Joshua. Come on, dude.
Well, if you ignore, hold on. Well, yeah, if you ignore the what? Hold on,
they play with this.
Well, this is what the Jews were doing, though. They ignore wider context, and in that verse alone, it does say Joshua is the branch.
But
that's
possible. I admit that's possible, but I just don't.
But he should have known. You're saying that Philo should have known that Zerubbabel is the branch.
Yeah. He's also called the mountain, and the reason why that's important is because in Numbers, the prophecy goes back to Numbers, where he says the mountain of the mount. What does he say? Something about a mountain, mountain prophecy, and something about a mountain and a star in the east. He says, Balak. Let me see if I can find it.
Okay, dude, look at this. I just asked ChatGPT in Zechariah that is the branch applied to Joshua or Zerubbabel, and it says to Joshua, and then it cites Zechariah 6. And look at what it says.
That's not right.
Listen, let me finish. This is what we were just mentioning. It says this is unusual because earlier prophecies about the branch in Jeremiah speak of the Davidic king, which would point to Zerubbabel, the governor from David's line. But in Zechariah's vision, it is the priest Joshua who gets crowned and is called the branch. So we're both right.
Yeah, but there's two crowns.
Yeah, I think this led to the merging of Jesus with the high priest and the king as the Melchizedek.
That I agree with. Jesus becomes both. He becomes the Davidic and the priest. He becomes both. He becomes like they're trying to put Zerubbabel's prophecy and Joshua into all one, into Jesus. By the way, here's what it says in Balaam's prophecy: the king of Moab summoned me from the eastern mountains. And then it says, the star will rise. Somewhere in here it says the star, but it says the eastern mountains. The reason why that's so important is because Zechariah says that Zerubbabel is a big mountain, and he goes, he's talking to Zechariah because Zechariah is the priest and he's the one that talks to the angel. And he says, you are just but a plain compared to the mountain that is Zerubbabel. So it's like, you can't ignore
See
that
if you can,
context about Zerubbabel. I'm not saying that there's something going on with Joshua.
See if you can pull him back.
Like important to this prophecy.
I'm a false.
I'm just saying you can't ignore that. Where
two goys, one Juba.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, because it means Yahweh saves too, or Yahweh's salvation. So just the naming convention there too is a giveaway. Exactly. And if they found it, so
no, I agree with that.
All right, I think we're going a little autist mode on this little rabbit hole that isn't all too relevant to Caesar's Messiah. But
yeah, last part. He says is Zechariah 4. So if you're reading Zechariah from chapter 1 all the way to 12 to 6, and then you get the context, which Philo would have done, he would have known from earlier in Zechariah. It says, then he said to me, this is the word of the Lord to Zerubbabel, not by might nor by power. Who are you, O great mountain? Before Zerubbabel, you will become a plain. He shall bring forth the top stone with shouts of grace, grace to it, which means he's building the temple. And so when Philo's writing about Zechariah, in Zechariah 6:13, it says, it is he who will build the temple to the Lord. It's so clear what he's talking about. And then but then to Carrier's point, it says, he will be clothed with majesty and he will sit and rule on the throne. He will be a priest on his throne, and there will be harmony between the two. So they're both kind of being honored here.
Here's the best way to, I think, conclude on this is that Philo doesn't explicitly say that the branch, which is the Logos, is named Joshua. It's Carrier infers that because Joshua is called the branch in that verse, that's what Philo thought the name was. And that is a little bit of an inference. We can agree on that.
That's all. That's
fair enough.
Exactly right. I agree with that.
All right, cool. All right, listen, real quick. I just want to zoom back out. So I just want to say something to the people that listen to this and all that other stuff, and kind of put into context what we're talking about, because I think a lot of people, like, they're totally lost about what you guys are talking about. I was following most of it, but like most people do not have any idea what the fuck you guys are talking about. So I just want to explain something though. These conversations that these guys are having are kind of conversations that we've been having in private and going back and forth with, and we're basically just like, this is how we kind of talk about things and debate over like disagreements and deal with disagreements. And I'm sure everyone here has been hearing or listening to like the Christian spaces and how Christians debate over disagreements and how they argue over stuff, right? And I mean, they sound like they're arguing over Harry Potter, okay? And they're seething over each other, and they're basically calling it like, and they're arguing over like ridiculous things, like, well, Jesus actually meant this when he meant this, and well, he was actually he made a joke here, and he was being sarcastic. Like, this is the kind of things that they argue with, and it's like a clown show. I think everyone here that's like listened to spaces where it starts turning into like Christian debate hour between Orthodox, Protestant, Catholics, and whatever. And CI and all this other stuff, like, you guys know what I'm talking about. And this kind of thing, this kind of showcases, I guess, in a way, like, this is how we kind of do this stuff, where we're just in good faith going back and forth, bringing up the text, citing our sources. It's not about like whose interpretation, like, look, we might still have disagreements, but we're trying to be objective and find the truth and put rationality to the test, right? We're trying to be like, we're doing science in a way, right? We have our hypothesis and we're trying to debunk them and kick the tires and all that stuff. So the reason that we're having like this space in general, I think, like, a good way to explain it is that within our community of people that are kind of talking about Christianity being fake, There's lots of people that have like different views on how that came about or whatever. And there's people that are kind of like flirting with other views and like learning about other stuff. And myself is big time included in this. And a lot of this comes from, Adam has his perspective, and BigTech came into this from his perspective. I came into my perspective. We're all coming from different perspectives. And really what matters, I think, is that like none of us are dogmatic in how we show it.
Yeah.
Even if we're like, believing, 100% or whatever in another one.
If I was dogmatic against BigTech, do you think I would have brought up Tacitus's passage?
Yeah, exactly.
That like I totally try to steel man as much as I can to just make sure everyone hears all this context so they can make their own decision.
Yeah, and this is how you actually kind of debunk and perfect and hone in ideas to they're never going to be perfect all the time, but they're going to be more they're going to be closer to the truth, and like that should be the goal, is kind of the truth or whatever. And if I had to like put this in a triangle or whatever, like a Atwell, Carrier, and like Lively work or whatever, whatever we fall in that triangle doesn't really matter as far as like what our version of mythicism is. It doesn't matter as much as like the overarching narrative that we understand is that this was a religion created with a purpose. Okay. And we can see the results of that purpose, and like the details on how that happened is something we can debate over forever, and we should talk about it, we should reveal it, and that's like part of explaining how it happened, right? But what really matters is that we all agree that this is to some degree a created tool that has led us to the modern world, right? And like just so disagreements over how that happened aren't actually major things, as like like these Christians debate over the Trinity and all this other nonsense or whatever. That I just wanted to point that out to the people that are listening or whatever, because like I said, I'm sure they have no clue what you guys are talking about for the last like 20 minutes or whatever. But I did think that was interesting.
And I want to say though, because me and Adam will go back and forth on this stuff a lot, we agree on the biggest points though. I might disagree with one thing Carrier says about the branch or some shit. We might have like this fucking hour-long crazy deep dive into why I'm right or why he's right. The point is though, even if there was a guy, like where I'm at with the historicity of Jesus is like, I don't think there's enough to conclude if there is or isn't. Like there's just the evidence is terrible. And I would not, and there's no way I would ever say that flat or that mythicism is like flat earth. It's not. It's very, very plausible. Even if there was a guy, the gospels are mythology, period. Even if there was a dude named Jesus who got crucified, all the stuff written about him in the gospels did not happen, period. We all agree on that part.
Yeah, real quick, just large, small, when you do listen to this, I just want to make sure you just got owned. I just want to make sure you know that you just got completely owned. Every time the last month you've told me that Neil has said that Carrier's flat earth and you spam that at me, you just got owned, just so you know.
Yeah, he's not. I've never even said that either.
Yeah, get owned, retard.
Even when me and him were like beefing or whatever, like whatever you want to call it, when he was writing his articles against me and I was making videos, we've always been we're in the same area of where we agree. We agree. Yeah. We agree that the gospels are mostly made up. I just have a few. I'm just like I'm autistic when it comes to details.
I get it. My position has just been like the position I came to this like. So I haven't for the audience, I guess, or whatever. I have an interesting transformation here. I started as an Atwell person who started following Neil's channel and got it debunked by Neil, and then I started hate watching Adam and like basically started adopting Adam's view of it. And I know Adam's view of like I know the references to the Old Testament and where he gets the motivation from, and I basically then adopted like a quasi Adam Richard Carrier view of mythicism, and now I'm getting through Nina Lisley's work. It's very hard for me to read. I'm nowhere near as good as an expert on this as a lot of people think I am. This is my hobby, okay, yeah. And I try to study it. And reading her work is really, really, really hard for me. Like it's probably the hardest book I ever read.
That's the next frontier.
Well, what I'm saying is, I was just gonna say, if I can't wait for Adam to get a time to read through this stuff, because basically, like I'm just saying, I'm not dogmatic about the mythicism stuff at all because of like this kind of thing where it's constantly like an evolving field, is what I would call it, with new information coming up. Like Adam finds new verses and new things all the time, right, to support his stuff, which is. So like all I'm saying is the dogmatism just needs to be left out. Basically, we have to always be willing to kind of have these kind of hash outs or whatever.
Oh yeah, and if Nina's right, it's game over. Mythicism is a fact because what she's putting forward is game changing. Like, and she's been she's like she was considered an authority on Paul up until just recently. She was like a mainstream. She's not like some random rogue scholar that just came out of nowhere. She's been teaching as a professor for years, and she's a emeritus professor right now. She had no reason to put this out there. She could have just retired.
If you watched her newest video with Derek, she explains how she got there through her research, which to me,
right?
Yeah, when I was reading, like to me, listening to her and reading what she wrote, and I listen to every interview that she's done, and all this stuff, and so I've heard this story many times. But to me, like it's like if you listen to how she got there, it actually makes the argument really well why it's her. Like it's not that she's not some like charlatan or anything like that. Like what she has is really strong, guys. Like it's really crazy.
Right, she's not, and she's like she all of a sudden.
Neil, can you give like a summary maybe of what her like?
Yeah.
It's hard for me to do sometimes. It's
like she would have no reason to just make everyone hate her in her field, because all the people in her field are all a bunch of like.
Well, I just mean like, what's the summary of her theory?
I'm getting there. So basically, what she's saying is, when you examine Paul, first of all, the paradigm that we're in right now, the mainstream consensus is that there's 7 authentic letters that Paul wrote, and the other ones are either written by a secretary or just forged. And even like even believers, scholars like agree with that. Like they all agree on that 7 letters, which is like Romans, 2 Corinthians, 1 Corinthians, Thessalonians, and whatever. There's 7 of them. And she was basically saying that she thinks that's wrong. So her research into Paul's Greek and studying Greek has led her to believe that the style that Paul wrote with in those particular 7 epistles looks like Greek that you would find in the 2nd century, even towards the end of the 2nd century, like middle to late 2nd century Greek. She calls it's called Second Sophistic Greek. And it's a style of Greek that you would find in writers like Lucian and people after Lucian. So middle of the 2nd century to almost 3rd century. And she's saying that Paul's letters look like that type of Greek, and on top of it, there's also internal evidence that it looks like these are a genre that was popular in that time period in Middle Platonist circles of writing fake epistles, and it's like a genre of philosophy where you would write fake letters that was injected with philosophy, and there was like it's like Plato's dialogues. They're not real dialogues. They're fake. And she thinks that Paul's letters are an exemplar of that. And basically saying that it's not that the Gospels are aware of Paul, it's that Paul's letters are aware of the Gospels. And she thinks that like the Gospels came first after 70 AD. She puts everything after 70 AD. That Christianity is a product of the temple falling and Jews and going, what are we going to do without our temple? Well, we need to reform our religion to be more universal now. And therefore, you get Christianity, you get the Gospels, you get Jesus, the new temple, it replaces the temple. And she thinks Paul's letters are basically forged in order to like give authority to these churches. And like, here's this guy, Paul, who is written about in the book of Acts. And remember, he got baptized by Peter and he did all these crazy things. He got bit by snakes and got away. Well, this guy wrote this letter, and here's what he says, and this is what we should do. We should follow this. So it's basically propaganda. That's what she says. And so far, the only feedback she's gotten is either people who think she's onto something, even M. David Litwell, which shocked me.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, yep. That's I was just gonna bring that up. Yep.
So he's like thinks that she might be onto something, and that we should start thinking of Christianity as a 2nd century religion, not a 1st century religion. That's what he said. Yep. And then the only people who have ever, Richard Carrier obviously dissed her yesterday in his blog, and I'll get into that in a second.
Price too, but go ahead.
Yeah, but the other people are basically saying, no, that's impossible, that's crazy. And at least Carrier is the first person to come along and actually give somewhat of like a rebuttal regarding her work, whereas the other people were just like, no way. That's impossible. Everyone knows Paul wrote in the 1st century. You're crazy. No one even read her book. They just said that. Well, at least Carrier looks like he at least understands what she's saying. because he made some points, but I have a lot of criticism for what he said. Like I don't have to get into it now. But
anyone who says that they've read her book and like understand it fully, that like you need to understand linguistics and Greek at a very high level. It's a very difficult to read book. She's making a public facing book that's like Jesus for Outer Space, but like what I mean, like a public facing book or whatever. And I think that I can't wait for that because I'll be able to actually cut that up and explain that to people a lot better. Because for me, it's very hard to understand if you don't have like a linguistic background.
Yeah, it's all Greek and it's all linguistics. It's a lot of it's an academic book. It's not for everyone.
Yeah. But anyway, so the reason I brought that theory up though, and the whole thing up is like I said, I think that the way we deal with like internal disagreements on like the details is a lot healthier and a lot better than the people that are. I mean, like I think that this is actually kind of a symptom and part of the reason Christianity is such a problem is that so many of our great brains throughout history, they sit around arguing Harry Potter lore like with Christianity, and they were they were doing that for like their whole lives. Even some of our like scientists and things like that, they were still obsessed with the theology and all this other stuff. And just like imagine if they didn't have didn't spend that time chasing their tail over like fake Hebrew scriptures, and they were instead doing kind of what we're here doing, which is like trying to come to the truth. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to figure it out, kick the tires, like I said, like come up with way like proofs, and then try to disprove those. You know what I mean? So I think this is actually how you solve problems. And when I talk about kind of applying like rationality to our problems, this is what I'm talking about. This kind of a way of getting to the truth.
Yeah.
It's good. What do you think, BigTech, as far as the Atwell stuff though goes? Where are you at? I wish Large Small was able to be here, because I do wish that he could like put forward his whatever he's probably like seething if he was listening to this right now, like they didn't bring up this, they didn't bring up that, or whatever. And I'm just like, where are you at with it? Because you're probably like the closest thing to like an advocate for his views or those views, right?
Yeah, well, I'm playing devil's advocate, right? So it's like I haven't even read these books. I'm just getting into them, and he's pressing me on them, and I'm going like, all right, well, great. So there's this, this is kind of like what I was getting to before. I didn't really make the full point, but what I dealt with the flat earthers, like I already knew the whole time. I know that it's a globe, like obviously. But the way that I engage with those guys is go, okay, well, you're well convinced that the globe is a lie, and you have this theory about the planet that has to do with, this big old, whatever. They spoofed the moon and the moon landing, and they're lying about the nature of the world that we live on. There's a dome, and they're hiding God from us. Like, okay, it's crazy, but rather than just calling them idiots and then just trying to convince them, like what you can do is you can jump into their space in the conversation with them and go, doesn't it make more sense? Like kind of like what Adam was just doing right there. And it's fine. The normal thing to do is like, doesn't it make more sense that when the sun goes down, at night, it's going around the curve of the planet? Like, doesn't that make more sense? They're not operating on a place of like what makes sense. What they're doing is they've been sort of like they've got hooked into a theory that's got them. And this is just what happens to people. Like we're talking about cults and things like that. Like once people get initiated into a concept like a cult or a theory or some idea, it's easier to fool somebody than convince them that they've been fooled, kind of thing. So what I'm doing is going like, all right, well, let me make sure that I fully understand what you're saying as well as I can. So I do got to read these books and stuff. And also let me hear what you're saying and find out what it would be that I could say back to you that might help you see. Like, what is the thing that you haven't thought of on your side? The flat earther or the Caesar's Messiah person. If you're wrong, like, what would you need to hear to be able to come out of it? Or if you're right, then what else would be true that would, be there to corroborate what you're saying and stuff. So, it's hard. It's not easy to perform an internal critique on somebody who's got a difficult theory to understand. And so that's what I'm trying to do first, is really understand exactly what is the Caesar's Messiah theory, because I've watched the YouTube videos, I haven't read the books. I got some more nuance to get, but I'm also like engaging with it because what seems to come out is, the rule of thumb we have with the flat earthers and these other types. It's that every accusation is a confession. It's kind of funny, and I'm wondering if that's going to be true here too. And so far, it seems like it might be, and that's kind of what I was getting at before. What Large Small was saying is that, Carrier is considered the flat earther of mythicists. That doesn't mean that he's literally believes the Earth flat. It means that he's doing a type of logic and a type of storytelling, a type of conspiracy theorying that's illegitimate, and it's based on hocus pocus, loosely connecting dots, and it's just sort of bizarre, like a flat earther. And what I'm wondering is that
everybody's made this mistake. Sorry, Big Tech, I interrupt. People have been saying this over and over again. Nobody's saying Carrier is the flat earther of the mythicist community. It's that mythicism is flat earth, like Holocaust denial. That's what these guys try to say. Just saying that Jesus didn't exist, they say, period, is like a flat earth, not just Carrier's version of mythicism. Sorry.
Okay. But it seems like there's basically two schools of thought, right? Isn't there is Carrier and Atwell? Is there a third position? I mean, we're talking about this lady.
As far as mythicism goes, there are way varying opinions. Like Carrier's ideas were a little bit different. They were a little more revolutionary. He adopted some of the ideas from, I forgot the guy's name. He wasn't a PhD.
Doherty.
Doherty.
Yeah, Doherty.
Earl Doherty.
Yeah.
And the Jesus puzzle.
And then there's Brody as well. And then
Yeah, but mythicism's been around for hundreds of years, and Robert Price, he sort of adopts the old school mythicism view, where that is just straight up made up. Like there's no mythical Jesus, no angelic proto Jesus involved. They just made this shit up. They just lied to people. It was just all fabricated based on mythologies and stuff like that, which I think honestly is a little more simple and a little more probable in my opinion. If mythicism is true, I think it's just made up. I don't think, because Carrier really likes to, he's really pushing for this idea that there was these like sects of Judaism in like the early first century, maybe first century BC, that were already worshiping a Jesus. And I don't see the evidence for it. I know he likes to point out like, that there was a lot of like in Alexandria, Egypt, you had like Greek speaking Jews that were probably worshiping Osiris, which is true. And so he sort of extracts from that they would.
I wanted to bring up the Dionysian aspect too.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
Which I wonder what you think about that. Like, doesn't that tend a little bit maybe in favor of the Roman theory? Because it wouldn't be them who would want to like code Jesus with a Dionysian aspect.
Yeah, but why would they want to give credit? Why would they want to remove their God into a Jewish man? Well, because I'll give you an example.
Yeah, it makes way more sense that the Jews were hijacking the pagan myth of Dionysus and turning it into Jesus to get all the pagans to follow Jesus, the Jewish Messiah.
And not only that, we know that Vespasian, we know what religious edicts Vespasian was doing because they were public. So he built the temple to Isis and Osiris in Rome in 70 AD, around 70 AD. And then his sons did too. Domitian was big into Isis and Osiris, and they were like bringing Egyptian religion to Rome. So they were like, we know that they were doing this, but they weren't changing the gods or anything. They were just putting temples to Osiris, and they were like, there was like churches in Rome already from in that time period.
Yeah, and they were setting up the obelisks and things like that.
Yeah. They were doing that. So
so
it wasn't like
the way that you guys asked that question, like why would they want to do that? I get the question, but you're not really asking. You're asking it basically as a way of saying like they wouldn't want to do that, right? Well, because like maybe there would be a reason why they'd want to do that if you consider that. Like, why would they want to replace Dionysus with some like Eastern god, like Jesus or something? Well, maybe they would. Maybe the reason they wanted to do that.
But they're building temples to Osiris and Dionysus in those periods. So it's not like they're replacing them. They're just building. They're still worshiping them.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah. Well, so the thing is, what I was going to propose, like a possible answer to that question, right, is like, so if there's a if there's a cult around Dionysus, that means there's a priesthood around it too.
Thank you
And there
for
was, right?
subbing,
I mean, there's going to be
baby.
priests
And Greenbow just gifted 5
and
subscriptions
priestesses.
on
I don't know
Kick.
exactly how it all works in the region, but a priesthood itself is like a form of sort of politics. It's like a form of control. Like if somebody has a priesthood, if there's a temple, if there's people who run the temple, if there's like a practice, if there's a cult, there's an aspect of political influence and social influence that comes from the temple. And it could be that there's like clashing heads, or maybe the priests of the temple are like more loyal to the previous dynasty or something like that. So it's a way of subverting them, or maybe there's a dissatisfaction with the way that the Dionysians are working, and they're thinking, oh, this is maybe, oh, look, they're erecting another temple to Dionysus. Oh, great, these Dionysian fuckers. We're gonna have to do something about them. Well, what if we kind of make this new Judean thing? The Judean thing is hip. Everybody likes the Eastern stuff. The stuff from Egypt's hot. What if we maybe pick up our version of this Judean cult, and maybe kind of like hack away at the Dionysians by making Jesus kind of a Dionysian character?
Another thing, if this was a Roman psyop, where is any evidence that the Romans were backing it? Where is the power of the Roman Empire institutional support for Christianity early on? We don't see that anywhere. Just a backwoods, backwater, fringe Jewish sect. It doesn't have any state. So the state wasn't running a Hasbara camp. The Romans weren't running some campaign to promote Christianity widespread for Jews.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that. Yeah, I don't know. How did that work? Neil, do you have like knowledge of that? I really don't. I don't really. Is that like how it worked in Rome? Was there state, mandate or support for different religions, or
any evidence
how
at
did that
all
go?
of the Romans supporting Christianity early on for Jews? No. And by the way,
that's not what.
that's the point I was making. And the reason
Yeah.
I say that is because I remember Berman had on Robin Faith Walsh and James Valiant, and he said something about that, and she shot him down and said, no, there was no Senate, nobody in the Senate, no proof at all that Rome was supporting early Christianity.
What would it
Neil
have looked
left.
like if they were?
There he is. Neil
Still
might be asking for a
listening?
mic again. It looks like he's listener.
Yikes, let me see. Oh, yeah.
Think about this, too. Remember how mad the Jews were? They had the Maccabean revolt because the Greeks came in and Antiochus tried to put his statue and their gods in the Jewish temple, and that the Jews freaked out. So then instead, they got Jesus in all the temples of the pagans as payback. You think that the Gentiles went from trying to put our statues in the Jewish temple to putting the King of the Jews into the pagan temples? They would never do that. It's the exact opposite. But the Jews would want to do that in response.
That's why it falls apart. I mean, we're talking about a hierarchy of systems where you have Caesar on top of everything. And if we're going to sit there and we're going to let people worship a Jewish man, and then those circles, you can't. Caesar is not God anymore. It's anti-Roman at its core. It's not pro-Roman. That's why, even with the Tacitus verse, it's just not enough to outweigh what you're saying right now.
Yeah, and what Atwell says is like, oh, well, because Titus is secretly the son of man, all these Jews, which it's not even Jews, it's Gentiles that ended up following Christianity, but hypothetically, all these Jews are really think they worshiping the King of the Jews, Jesus, but it's really actually secretly, and they don't know it, it's actually Titus. Like, that's such a far-fetched thing.
They all think it's the Jewish Messiah, and they're all like, it's pointless to do that. I mean, it would be like me being like, you know what? Here's $1 million. And it's like, go buy a nice house. And then I'm like, really, they're buying my house right now. But they get to live in the house. Like, they're living in the house and they're enjoying the money and they're spending $1 million. And I'm sitting here going, but they don't even know. They just bought my house. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
I don't care. It just doesn't make any sense. What do you think about? Did you say something with BigTech? I thought you said something.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking. Yeah, I wonder what Atwell would say to that. I wish he was here to field that question.
Yeah,
Like,
we
what's
should
his
have
concept?
a conversation with them. I wouldn't mind talking to him about it. He reached out to me not that long ago to have a conversation.
He would
Yeah,
probably
we
say,
should.
well, look at the typology, look at the Flavian signature. Look, this Son of Man verse is actually, if you squint at it and look at it sideways, this is actually could be talking about what Josephus described in the Jewish wars. And I think all of those examples are huge reaches and better explained else. What?
I do think it'd be a good idea just to have a conversation with them and get it from the source, because who knows? Maybe we're missing something, but I don't know. Like I said,
well, I have the book right here in front of me. I could open it up to one of his examples of how the Son of Man is really talking about Titus, and we can see if it's sound and legitimate or a stretch or not.
Yeah. Yeah, hold on. Before you do that real quick, I just wanted to, there's something BigTech talked about, and I just want to real quick. Hey, BigTech, one thing that's like a problem with Atwell's theory that it's like all the critical analysis says this. So I don't know. So you might have seen this, you might not have. I don't know. Is that by the time the Gospels are created, at least by the like official narrative, let's just say the mainstream narrative when the Gospels are created, but by the time the Gospels are created, and within Atwell's theory as well, the Essenes, the Sadducees, and the Pharisees are all non-militaristic. Like they're working with the Romans to some degree or another, and like their inner squabbles are who's working with the Romans. The only ones are the Zealots, who are still like militaristic in a way. And so whenever we're talking like within our overarching theory, and we're talking about like how, like who was Atwell, or who would this have been aimed at to pacify, right, within Atwell's theory? Well, it would have only been aimed specifically at those Zealots, right? I would be curious what Atwell's like comeback to that is. You know what I mean? Or but you know what I mean? Because if it's, we're talking about like, oh, it'd be aimed at these temple guys or these Essene guys, but those guys are all pacifists already. You know what I'm saying? Like they've already been. Now, maybe the critique is that, okay, well, just getting them to adopt like the emperor's got like Messiah concept is like enough. But I'm just saying like the motivation for saying like you're trying to pacify like Judaism or whatever, using this like the Atwell's theories, like the religion, you're trying to pacify or nullify what they're doing. Like it only makes sense in the context of the Zealots, if that makes, you know what I mean? If that makes sense. It doesn't actually make sense.
That's
for the
why
other
and if you want to convince the Zealots are writing in Aramaic and Hebrew and consider Greek like the foreign tongue of their enemy.
That was going to be the next point I was going to make. But go ahead, Big.
Sorry to steal your thunder.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
That's why I'm interested to hear what Atwell would have to say to these type of objections, because I would assume he must have thought this stuff through, and his books are going to be more geared toward presenting his theory, right? So he's trying to link together these different citations and show this is where I'm getting my impression that this could be some sort of fingerprint that points at their signature on the thing. So that's what his book's going to be about. But then he doesn't like have a whole chapter. It's like, and here's what my detractors might say, and here's my answers to all of that. Like, that's probably not going to be in the book. So that's why I'd like to have him answer some of these. Like, well, all right, so let's say your theory was true. What about this? How come, like, wouldn't we also see this or that? And why don't we? Or what would be the motivation for doing this? It doesn't make sense in the context. And what do you say to that? I'd like to hear what he has to say for all that. It seems like that'd be interesting.
He reached out to me not too long ago, maybe like a year ago or something.
By the way, Neil, they're asking if you could turn your mic up. Are you able to do that?
Oh,
crank up the gain a little bit. Yeah,
is that
just
better?
a little lower than the rest of us.
Is that better?
Yep.
Has mine been too long? Somebody told me I got to move the phone farther away. Is mine peaking?
Yeah, yours occasionally peaks, Adam, but it's not too bad.
I'll keep it way farther.
Yeah, it's not too bad. You're the loudest of us. It's not that bad, but Neil was the quietest. But yeah, that's better.
So he did reach out to me and he was like, I'm a big fan of your channel. He's like, I heard some of the things you said about me, and I think you might be a little bit, you might have me misunderstood. I forgot what he said. Something along those lines. He was polite, and he was like, maybe we can have a conversation sometime. I was like, yeah, all right. And I think I was going to Greece, so I didn't set it up yet. but I'm down to do it. I think we could do it. One of these spaces would be a good idea.
Well, I would just say for you, Neil. I mean, I follow all these types of YouTube stuff in that YouTube sphere, and in my view, the Caesar's Messiah thing is being pushed heavily, which is why I sympathize with like big tech and large small. I would say in terms of like basically really hammering this out. So like I don't agree with the Atwell theory, but I think that us honing and fighting against this and having this friction against it is incredibly important because we have guys come up in the spaces that we do like once or twice a week who are basically like they're like me like but like slightly less advanced or whatever on the hobby where they're just like watching these videos and they're coming to these similar conclusions based on that stuff, right? So we have to actually come up with good proofs against this. And like big tech is doing, I like say what I want about large small. Like big tech in or large small is like influencing and being annoying enough. He's like being relentless enough about this topic, where it's like pushing this conversation in a way that I actually do think is helpful to the overall thing. Like hugely helpful, actually.
Yeah, what happens if you ignore these guys is they become even more satisfied with their own theory that like, oh, I'm right. They just ignore us because they don't have good arguments against us. So if you just kind of hand wave them away, they just become a little bit more hardened in their view. That's what happens with these types of cult or fringe or, highly opinionated little niche groups. So you can just go, they're irrelevant. That's dumb. That's rejected. Who would believe that? That's stupid. But now they take that as going like, oh, you're stupid. You don't even get what we're saying. You don't have good answers for us. That's why you won't even engage with us. And then it just becomes factions. And, I want to make sure that I understand all sides. And if there are good counters, like let's discover what are the best ones. What are the really good debunks, if there are some, for Atwell, or like what are the most gaping holes in his theory, and also like present them too in a way that it doesn't have to be, well, we figured out why you're an idiot and we think you're wrong and here's why, so we got you. It could, it doesn't have to be like that either. Like everybody can just go like, well, we're searching for who's got their, hands on this thing the best way. And maybe there's even things we can learn from each group that we haven't thought of. And the synthesis of the whole thing could become maybe even, more than we started with, by the end of the conversation kind of thing. So like I said, with the flat earth thing, I think it's actually just a great analogy. I learned a lot. I've learned things about the planet. I've learned things about physics. I've learned things about history that I didn't know from talking to the flat earthers. I learned things about what do they call it? There's like the way that they do surveying the altitudes and everything that they're like laying out. I learned about surveying. I learned about things about the stars and the way that they work. I learned about the different types of eclipses, and I've learned about the way that light does all this refraction through the densities in the atmosphere. I learned things about photography I didn't know before. Man, there's so much that I learned because the flat earthers are all just like totally screwed up about what the globe is. I learned things about the moon landing, about the Apollo missions. I learned about the space shuttle program. I can go on and on. It really opened up my mind to a lot of knowledge about earth science and physics and all sorts of things and history. And I learned about these experiments that they did where they're trying to discover whether or not the ether exists, and it led up to them discovering a relativity theory. And man, I didn't know all that stuff. I have a way better understanding of the globe now than before I started talking to the flat earthers. It's weird how that worked. And so that's why I'm eager to engage in this, because like that's how my experience goes, is that when I dig into something, I find it to be weird. Well, there's a reason why these people are thinking about it, and sometimes they're onto some shit that I'm not even onto yet. And so I might not end up agreeing with them at the end of the day, but I'm probably going to learn something along the way. They might learn something too. And so while it might sound like to Adam that I'm trying to, a monkey branch onto something that he disagrees with, this might be a distraction, or I'm trying to debunk him or something. It's really not like that. From my view, it's like, well, I don't see why this wouldn't, at the end of it, strengthen whatever theory that we're trying to come up with here, because we don't really have, we don't have a time machine. We can't go there and see what it was. We're piecing together little bits of evidence that we have through history. and everybody's doing their best to kind of like coalesce all of that into a coherent view, like a picture, a story about what took place and why and how. And we don't have all of the pieces. So if somebody goes, hey, look what I see over here, this is worth looking at, even if it conflicts with what we think, I'm happy to go look at it. Like, what are you seeing, and why do you think that that's meaningful, and how does that fit into the story? And if it doesn't, why not? And then what does that mean? And then there's just like, now you have more data. So that's why I'm interested in all this stuff. And like you said too, with Amalek, that's a very good point, that if this is becoming popular, if the YouTube algorithm's pushing it, if videos on this subject are getting tens of thousands of views, if there's a lot of discussion going on in the comments, if the Reddit thread forums are pushing this theory, if more and more people are buying into it, well, boy, we better find out if it's right or not. And if it's not, then what's the best way to bring people out of that if they're getting confused? Is this going to lead into confusion that we don't want in this subject? Is there going to be like a big clash of factions between the Carrierists and the Atwellists or something? And you know, so maybe there's good to come out of it. There's a lot of stuff we can learn, but there's also probably some chaos we could avoid by engaging with it willfully and sort of like with a level head and just being chill. Everybody could just go like, all right, well, there's a disagreement here, but that's all that it is. We don't have to get our egos involved. We don't have to worry about, you know, there's not, what is there to lose from looking into the other side and really entertaining it? So my style of it too is that what I'll try to do is I'll go, let me see if I can understand you completely, really get my head wrapped around what you're saying. And then can I even go further and go, all right, what if that's true? Let me look at the world through that lens for a little bit and actually adopt it for myself and be like, all right, if let me throw in with you, actually, let me like totally go and be you for a minute. Let me see the world through your eyes. Let me see what that feels like. Let me look at history through that lens and see what that does. You know, what is it like to be a guy who believes in that? What does it do to the Bible if I look at it through the lens that, oh, the Romans wrote this? Like, how does that flavor it now? And what do I feel about that feeling that comes along with that? What's that like? And, you know, does it pass the sniff test, you know, logically, but also even sort of when I engage with it, you know, from a worldview of believing in it without being so skeptical, and which one feels more right? There's even a side to that doesn't really prove anything, but experientially it's sort of important. So I'll do that. Like I spent the whole weekend being a flat earther. When I learned about flat earth, I was like, all right, I'm just going to see the world as though it is flat. All right, so I'm looking at the stars. Those are in the firmament. I'm looking at the world. It's young. When the sun goes down, it's just going far away. Like, what if that was the case? What would that do to me and my life? Like, well, how would I feel as a person on a flat earth that has a dome on it? And so I was like being one of them for a minute. So because I want to understand them, you know, and it's actually kind of trippy. So I kind of want to do that with the Roman theory, guys. I'm going through that with this fellow who, you know, he watches my stream. He's been watching my stream since way before I even started getting real into the mythicism thing and getting into these debates. He was just watching my show. I started engaging with Adam more, and he really started piping up like, hey, no. Yeah, the Bible's fake. Yeah, it's a myth. But he thinks Adam has latched onto the wrong theory about how the myth came about. He's like, no, it's a myth, but it's a different kind of myth and by different people for a different reason. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Weird.
It's an interesting theory because it takes everything into this very simple. This was the reason why Rome got conquered by Jews is because it was a plan from day one. And it's just like, well, it's very simple. That makes it sound nice. Like there was no one got overthrown. This was all in their plans, and Constantine knew all this kind of, but like when you start looking at it that's the macro way to look at it. When you start looking at it in the micro, you start to see it doesn't really add up. It's an interesting theory. It is. Because you're like, how can Rome fall to the Judaism? And it's like, you think this fixes that somehow, but it just doesn't.
Yeah, and then just to like loop this back to like Adam's overarching view, and I think that this is basically like whether to what degree is it conscious or subconscious. Part of Adam's huge issue with this view is for those that don't know, this view blaming the Romans for Christianity's creation and the corruption by the Romans is the Jewish critique of Christianity. Not just like the modern version or whatever, where Jews today are like, oh, you know, there's a lot of Jews modern today that make the argument that like Christianity was like a perfect Torah observant version of Judaism, and then that it got taken over by the Romans and turned into basically paganism. That's what Jews wrote about Christianity in the Talmud a ton of times. A lot of times when we have these Christians complaining about Jews talking about Christians in the Talmud, their critique of Christianity is that it is pagan, and they blame that on the Romans. And I'm just gonna it's the Taldat Yeshua. You know this, Neil? You know this one?
Taldat Yeshua. Yeah.
So what this is, it's the generations of Jesus, and it's basically like this satirical like gospel written by the Jews in the Middle Ages, or actually before that. I think maybe it's actually the 4th century. It's early on, and essentially what this is it's them making this argument. They're basically they're making fun of and saying that Jesus was fake. He did like false miracles. It's like the whole thing as a sorcerer. It's all sorcery and deception, and that it's Roman influenced, right? So part of this issue, in my view, and why we have to really push back on the Atwell stuff, is because it, in this really weird way, it aligns perfectly with the Talmud, and it aligns perfectly with like the Jewish interpretation and issues with Christianity. So if people are going to just like blindly adopt that because of, you know, watching Caesar's Messiah or anything like that, that's like the type of psyop that we need to be or the type of idea we need to be very careful of when an idea perfectly aligns with what they're saying. Does that make sense?
Should I read what it says about Vespasian in the Talmud real quick, just so people know what you're talking about?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I think, like, look,
It's pretty funny.
Are we we're trying to be objective here? So we're trying to give everybody trying to steel man it, right? So, okay, here's what it says.
Yeah.
It says, Rabbi Yohanan ben Zakkai reached the Roman camp. Okay, so just so you know, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically before this, it's a story about how Jerusalem's getting sacked, and Rabbi Yohanan ben Zakkai needs to sneak out of Jerusalem so he can make some sort of peace offering, some sort of like white flag peace offering to Vespasian so they can stop getting sacked, or just anything, any to do something, because they're about to all die. And he says, by the way, the Masada went out guns blazing. These people went out praying to live, like, please don't kill us. Jerusalem is not like Masada. Anyways, the Roman camp, he sneaks out to the Roman camp and he says, greetings to you, king. Greetings to you, the king. Vespasian said to him, you are liable for death penalties for 2 counts. 1, because I am not a king, and yet you call me a king. And furthermore, if I am a king, why didn't you come to me until now? Now, I always pause right here. What the fuck kind of response is that? This dude, you are liable of death on 2 counts for that. Like, what? He just called you a king, and that's the first thing you say? This dude sounds like a psychopath. But anyways, this probably didn't happen, by the way. Rabbi Yohanan ben Zakkai said to him, as for what you said about yourself, I am not king. In truth, you are a king. If not now, then in the future. As if you are not a king, Jerusalem will be handed over to you into your hand, as it is written, the Lebanon shall fall by a mighty one. Isaiah 10:34, which is a messianic prophecy, by the way. And a mighty one means only a king, as it is written, and their mighty one shall be one of themselves, and their ruler shall proceed from the midst of them. Jeremiah 30:21, indicating that a mighty one parallels ruler, and Lebanon means the temple. As it is stated, the good mountain and the Lebanon, Deuteronomy 33:24. There's the mountain one again, by the way. And as for what you said with me on your second comment, if I am a king, why didn't you come to me till now? There are zealots among us who did not allow us to do this. So this Jew, this Sadducee or whatever he is, he's going to be a rabbinic Jew, but he's a Sadducee at this point. Basically, just threw the zealots under the bus and said, "I didn't do anything wrong. I've always liked you." Like, he's like, what? They're admitting this in the Talmud. Anyways, understanding that Rabbi Yohanan ben Zakkai was prepared to ask him not to destroy the temple, Vespasian said to him, if there is a barrel of honey and a snake wrapped around it, wouldn't they break the barrel in order to kill the snake? In a similar fashion, I am forced to destroy the city of Jerusalem in order to kill the zealots barricaded within it. Rabbi Yohanan ben Zakkai was silent and did not answer. In light of this, Rav Yosef later read the following verse about him, and some say that it was Rabbi Akiva who applied the verse Rabban Yohanan ben Zakkai, I am the Lord, who turns wise men backwards and makes their knowledge foolish. Isaiah 44:25. As Rabbi Yohanan ben Zakkai should have said the following to Vespasian in response. In such a case, we take tongs, remove the snake, and kill it. And in this way, we leave the barrel intact. So too, you should kill the rebels and leave the city as it is. In the meantime, as they were talking, a messenger arrived from Rome and said to him, Rise, for the emperor, Nero, has died, and the noblemen of Rome plan to appoint you as their leader. Which doesn't make any sense because, wait, unless this is not Nero and this is about Vitellius. I don't know. This doesn't make sense though. This is all wrong. Anyways, at that time, Vespasian was only wearing one shoe. When he tried to put it on the other one, it would not go on his foot. He tried to remove the other shoe he was already wearing. It would not come off. He said, "What is this?" Yohanan ben Zakkai said, "Be not be distressed or troubled. Good tidings have reached you, as it is written. Good tidings make bone on the bat, make the bone fat." Proverbs 15. And your feet have grown fatter out of joy and satisfaction. Vespasian said to him, "But what is the remedy? What must I do in order to put on my shoe?" Rabbi Yohanan, this is all cryptic. This is not real. This is all like allegory. It says, "Have someone with you who are you displeased with come and pass before you, as it is written, a broken spirit dries the bones." So I'm trying to find where it says about the Yavni city. It's really important. Anyways, long story short, you can read this for yourselves. The point is, here it is. Here it is. I almost got to it. I'm just gonna keep going. Vespasian then said to Rabbi Yohanan ben Zakkai, I will be going to Rome to accept my new position, and I will send someone else in my place to besiege the city and waging war against it. By the way, that ended up being Titus and a half Jew named Tiberius Julius Alexander. But before I leave, ask something from me that I can give you. Yohanan ben Zakkai said, Give me Yavni and its sages, and don't destroy it. Spare the dynasty of Rabbi Gamaliel, Paul's teacher, and do not kill them as if they were rebels. And lastly, give me the doctors for Rabbi Zadok. So, like, he literally goes there, begs him not to kill them, begs him to spare the city. Vespasian tells him to fuck off, but then he makes a deal with them and says, fine, I'll spare Rabbi Gamaliel and his school, which is over in the city of Yavni. So they spare this one city called Yavni where Rabbi Gamaliel was. And because of that, according to the Talmud, because of that, Judaism was spared. And then from that day, literally, this is telling you the story of how rabbinic Judaism started because of Vespasian sparing Rabbi Gamaliel and Yavni.
And specifically, then he takes it to Rome. Like they linked that to then, and then we will take it to Rome, right? So it's basically like setting up. It's like the setup of.
And Gamaliel is Paul's teacher.
Yeah.
He's literally telling you, like, Paul's school is going to survive and go to Rome.
Yeah, exactly.
This is linked to Christianity, dude. I'm telling you.
Yeah. So like I said, the overarching point, though, as far as like what we're talking about, Adam, I don't know if you're still there or not because I know you're starting your show soon. So you should. I want to hear what you have to think about all that stuff.
Adam, what do you think about this?
Yeah.
No, he probably is getting ready.
I wonder how accurate it is if this story really goes back to the end of the 1st century. If this is just lore and legend and cope that they came up to explain what happened, I really don't know.
I think so. I don't think this happened.
Yeah, I think it's like dog whistling to people who understand all this stuff. When people that really know this material read that, we all kind of know like what they're trying to use those allegories for, and like how, you know what I mean. But you need to be like deep knowledge and you need to understand it.
Yeah. There's stories in that same. in this same book in the Talmud, the one that I was just reading. So, which one is this? This is I
That's the one
forgot
that talks about Nero being the
Gittin. Yeah, Nero became a Jewish sage in this one.
Yeah.
Like what?
They say that
not
Nero's
happen.
Jewish in that Talmud, in that part of the Talmud. Yeah, it's really weird.
I do want to piggyback on something Amalek said a couple minutes ago about how the Roman provenance Caesar's Messiah theory like completely aligns with like the Jewish view of Christianity. They blame Gentiles. They say, especially like Chaim Maccabee in the Mythmaker wrote that Paul was a subverter of the true Jesus movement and he made it pagan and he made it anti-Semitic. And this is the view that Jews have of Christianity, is that it just began as a Jewish movement, but then the Romans and the Gentiles corrupted it and added paganism and idolatry into it. And I think the biggest issue is that this Roman provenance obscures the truth that it's Jewish provenance. And this is a Jewish messianic sect. And the Messiah in Judaism is about conquering the nations. So it covers that up. It blames Rome. And then if a bunch of people start thinking, oh, well, if Jesus and Christianity is fake, and they don't realize that it's what the motive behind creating it is, the true motive, and they think it was just a Roman corruption, a lot of those people might fall back into just being Noahides. They'll still believe Judaism. They'll just think Judaism and being a Noahide is the true religion, not that fake Roman version of Christianity.
Well, that's how a lot of the Noahide rabbis, like the Noahide converting rabbis, you know what I'm talking about? Like the rabbis that are Jews themselves but are trying to convert people into Noahides. This whole line of reasoning that we're laying out here, this like it's a Roman corruption thing. This is kind of what they play at. Like this is what they start with, kind of. And also, like just to also back up what you're saying, like this is in the Rambam from the 12th century. Like this is Maimonides talks about this explicitly. He basically says like, yes, Christianity creates like the true messianic era. However, like he describes it as a diabolical fraud. And he explains that like it's Hellenistic or Roman idolatry mixed into Judaism. And that's why they hate it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And if the Romans created Jesus as a conspiracy in Christianity, where are all the Jewish writings exposing that? Where are all the Jews saying, hey, this is a Roman fake and this is meant to subvert us? Like, we don't see anything like that.
Yeah, what the Jews are saying is that it's like shitty Jews made it, basically, is what they're saying. And then the critique from the Jewish side is like these shitty Romans or these shitty Jews that were like really bad at Judaism, they made it, and then the Romans, and then it went off and like created a wildfire and created like hundreds and hundreds of different kinds, and then they brought it back together at Nicaea. That's like their narrative.
They always the Jerusalem like Sadducee, / Pharisee, those people, like the people, those two parties over there, always looked at the Alexandrian Jews as like their like little retarded brother. Like they're like these like they're like they're just they're Jews, but they're like they don't know it. They don't know.
It's how Israeli Jews view American Jews.
Yeah, exactly. That's
what it's like.
That's a great comparison.
Mm-hmm.
Alexandrians were like American Jews. They're like Brooklyn Jews.
Yeah,
that's what they were like. It's a great
like Hollywood, LA Jews. Really?
Yeah, either or.
Yeah, I mean, I would say like actually, you know what? Alexandria was probably a mix of all three. It was probably a mix of New York City, Hollywood, and LA, Hollywood, and Miami, right? Like that's basically what Alexandria was. All three of those things to get combined.
You know what? Alexandria, you're probably right.
Because it was also the vacation. Alexandria was also the vacation spot of all of the Roman Empire.
Well, and they produce all these. They produce a lot of literature there. A lot
It's like all three of those
you're
things.
You're probably right that it was Alexandria was like the LA Jews, and Rome Jews were like the Brooklyn Jews.
Yeah, that's
funny. There's a lot of synagogues in Rome at that time too.
Yeah, for sure. That's funny.
Yeah, I think that's kind of how it was. Yeah, there was just different factions. They were all sort of the same, but not exactly. You'll have like the New York Jews, you have the LA Jews, you have the Miami Jews, and it's all the same, but also not. They in California they're doing different stuff. You got the movie industry and whatever, and in New York you got the finance and the news media and the academia, and then you have the other ones. The Miami Jews are. They're dealing with, I don't know what they're mixing up with the cartels.
You know what I just thought about?
I don't know.
The way they're presenting Vespasian
Yeah, you get the diamond Jews. Yeah, go ahead.
In the Gittin, the way they're describing Vespasian is like a Cyrus figure. The way Trump is being presented now, Trump is like the new
100%.
Vespasian, and they need that archetype to be part of the process. Like Vespasian, they're trying to make him to be this figure, even though he's knocking down the temple, he's still doing like some sort of, I don't know, he's fulfilling some sort of purpose in their minds. But now you got Trump doing that, but it all ultimately goes back to Cyrus being called the Anointed, a Moshiach in the Hebrew Bible,
Yeah.
and the Christ in the Septuagint, the Christos. So that's what it looks like they're doing with Vespasian. They're trying to make him think that he's that figure. If that really happened, I'm saying, but I think it's written later. I think there's just like,
and it's possible they would have done that because they wanted Rome to adopt Christianity.
yeah.
So if
like
there's any truth to it, I think that could be a little element of it.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah, if there's any truth to what they're saying in Roman and Caesar's Messiah, then it's that. It's like they're using the Roman intelligentsia to so that they can adopt Judaism, not the other way around.
So you just reminded me of something we were getting to earlier with when Amalek was talking about, and I had said the things that I learned when I started engaging with the flat earthers. That I the more I talked to them, the more I started getting their perspective. That like much of it really came out of COVID, you know, like the general distrust of the government because of Fauci and whatever, and a lot of it plays off of like the importance of flat Earth is not just about understanding the nature of the globe, but it's about understanding the nature of the ruling elites, and they're actually like satanic, and there's a bunch of 666 imagery, and it's like tied into their suspicion about CERN, and these people are hiding God from us. Like that's why they invented the globe, to make us think that we're alone in space and in a void and everything's atheistic, right? But if you realize that the Earth's flat and there's a dome and that God's up there over Polaris and the North Pole, you realize you're actually like in God's little Yahweh's terrarium Earth snow globe thing. Like your life has a different purpose, and there's demons here and stuff like that. And so the worldview is actually very... there's a worldview that comes along with that view of the world, you know, like literally, and but it has to do with like your life and your purpose and stuff. And I found that to be kind of interesting as an emergent like understanding that I got from dealing with them, that they're not just having a dispute about like the science, it's about politics and religion and everything. So in the same way, the more I'm talking to this large small guy, it starts occurring to me that if I were to adopt Atwell's worldview, right, what I end up stumbling on is that what comes along with that is a worldview I hadn't considered, where now it repaints the story where like the Jews were just hanging out, like in this view of the Caesar's Messiah thing, the Jews are hanging out. They're just like being Jews. They're just hanging out in their land, right? They got Judea, they got Jerusalem. They're just doing their thing. They're just practicing their religion. They're not harming nobody. They're just like being there, but they're actually being oppressed. Like the Romans have moved in on their territory. They're occupying them. They're sort of like a vassal state. They're having to pay taxes up to Rome, and they're sort of like under the heel, right? So they're suffering through that. And then after they're sort of like righteously struggling as the underdog against the oppressor, then the oppressor comes down hard on them and destroys Jerusalem and burns the temple and all of that. So they're like innocent victims. And then on top of all of that, Rome comes along and then undermines their religion too, and like punks them with this satirical mocking of their faith. And and Rome like makes this spin-off of Judaism that's ripping them off and like subverting them, even if they had a chance to do a rebellion or something. They're being basically like cucked by Rome, who's giving them this pacifistic form of Judaism in the form of Christianity, and making them worship an idol that's actually like a coded thing about the Caesar. And so if you recast history into the Caesar's Messiah worldview, you start seeing that the Jews were innocent victims. They were underdogs who were absolutely oppressed and abused by Rome, who was this big, bad, evil entity. Like the evil empire of Rome destroyed Judea, who didn't basically do anything wrong. And then Rome elevates this religion to becoming the state religion and then spreads it into all the lands. And the poor Jews for 2,000 years have been living in all of these lands because their region was destroyed and taken from them. And they've been cursed to live among the constant reminder of their oppressor who destroyed them and then ripped their religion off. So for 2,000 years, these poor innocent Jews have been struggling, living under this horrible condition. And now they're finally getting their revenge on Rome. And they've been such, like, you know, they've banded together as this underdog who survived through the centuries, only to emerge now victorious, basically as a small little tiny minority who kind of like rules the world because they've just persevered and they've kept their faith, and they're finally about to have the ultimate triumph over Rome. And so, in fact, it's sort of like a come from behind underdog victory story. If you look at the Caesar's Messiah narrative, it's like evil Rome stole from them, and now the Jews are getting back at Rome, and Rome's finally about to be under the heel of Judea, and the underdog comes out on top, and it's sort of like a happy ending for the Jews. It's weird. Like, that's what that story comes out to be.
It's a scapegoating of Esau also. The whole framework is a scapegoating of Esau and Edom in Rome.
100%. Yeah.
Isn't that weird?
And yeah, who gets the final laugh and who's winning now? And now Rome is fallen, paganism has been destroyed, and the rabbis are bragging that through Jesus, the God of Israel has conquered most of the world.
Yeah, and I keep saying, I've been saying this forever now. If Theodosius never wrote that law code that said that Jews and Christians can't marry, and that Jews can get 2/3 or what is it, like 20% of all the seats in the Senate, and like there was no court Jews living in all these emperors, in these places, they'd be extinct by now. Christianity is the one vehicle that kept Judaism alive throughout these years.
What's that book, Neil? You showed me the other day. But what was that called? I read the foreword or the beginning of it. That lays this out, that like Christianity is what caused Judaism to survive, basically. Well, hold on, I'll find it if you can't remember.
Are you talking about the source book that I was talking about? That has the sources in there?
Yeah, I'll find it. Don't worry
The
about it.
paradox of anti-Semitism says that.
Well, yeah, because what happens is European society sets it up in a certain way where Jews don't want to mix with people. They want to keep their bloodline pure. So they end up getting what they
it's the
want.
opposite. Christianity didn't destroy Messianic Judaism. It ensured the survival of Messianic Judaism.
Yeah, and here's the thing. All these other ancient cults, like the Thracians, worshippers of Zelmoxis, or the Phrygian worshippers of the Great Mother. Like, do you ever met someone who's a Phrygian? You ever met someone who's, I'm a Thracian? You ever met someone from an Illyrian? No, they're all been swallowed up by bigger populations, like small fish from a bigger fish, and that would have been the Judahites. They'd be swallowed up in these populations if there wasn't Christianity separating Jews from Gentiles. That would have they in effect, even if they made them live in ghettos and said, all right, you're second-class citizens, they still were citizens, whereas the original pagans that were inhabiting these cities were not citizens at all and were illegal now. So in a way, even though they became the enemy of the Christians in a way, and there was times where shit got horrible, like there was times where they get kicked out of these cities and stuff like that, but they still were basically the way they were ditched out kept them as a cohesive society in a way.
Yeah, and Christianity wasn't designed to appeal to Jews. It calls them the sons of Satan.
Yeah,
and
any educated Jew will look at Christianity in 2 seconds and go, no.
Right. Yeah. They're drinking blood, which is prohibited. They believe the Messiah is God, which is considered idolatrous. They're not observing the Sabbath. They're not circumcising. There's a prophecy in Deuteronomy, I believe it is. I want to say Deuteronomy 13, where they say, if anybody comes and says, do not follow the laws, that is a false prophet and don't fall for it. And that's what Christianity basically is. So it's built in Christianity for Jews to find it unpalatable so that they don't become Christians. which further stopped their assimilation. And also, this new sect of Christianity is blaming Jews for killing Jesus. So that
The Middle Ages,
persecution on Jews actually kept Jews following Judaism, and Christianity
and they
believes
had
that
a
Jews are
monopoly.
chosen.
They have a monopoly on banking. Christians were not allowed to perform usury. So in all of these cities in the Middle Ages, the bankers were Jews. And so they had a monopoly on banking. They were involved. They were really good lawyers because they're studying Torah and trying to figure out how to, they're like lawyers doing lawyers with like all this stuff.
Oh.
And like I said, Theodosius is one that kept them alive because Theodosius made it a decree that they had to have a certain number of seats in the Senate, and they had to have their own little area that they were separated off in society from them. That's how all of Europe followed suit until modern times.
And the fact that we have a first century BC smoking gun that says that the Messiah is going to rule the nations with the rod of his mouth, and says with no military but with the rod of his mouth, meaning his words, his teachings, is going to conquer the world. And then Christianity is the Messiah of the teachings that ends up conquering the world, not with the military. Like there's your motive and your inspiration, and it's completely Jewish, not a Roman conspiracy.
Think about the psychology behind setting up your society. Everyone's worshiping a man who is Jewish. Now imagine, there's also surrounding that, there's this idea that the Jews killed him. So they sort of like set up the society around this sort of dichotomy between the Jews are bad, they're evil, they don't believe in our Messiah. But our
they're
Messiah
like the supernatural villain, but they're central to the story.
And imagine being a Jewish person living in some city in France somewhere, and you grow up knowing that they follow your prophets, and they think that their prophecies pointing to this guy, and it's not. Imagine how kind of special you would think you are. They set up a psychology where people think that they are chosen based on books written by people who are backdating themselves. You know this now. If you watch my channel, you know that there was no Torah before 300 BC. Now, but you live in a society throughout the Middle Ages, in the late Middle Ages, in the medieval period, and throughout the Renaissance, that thinks that this stuff goes all the way back to Moses in 1500 BC. So they set up just think of the psychology that delivers that would deliver.
Yeah. Hey, Eric, can you mute your mic? Eric, can you mute your mic, please? Eric, guy just came up or whatever.
Hey guys, I gotta leave in a couple of minutes. It'd be cool to hear if there's any other hands that maybe somebody else has something that they're dying to say that we've been missing.
I gotta run soon too, but yeah, I'm down to hear that.
Yeah, I don't think we have any more hands, actually. The Eric guy, I don't think he was listening. He had an open mic. I went ahead and dropped him. And honestly, I think Neil stayed longer than I thought he would. Let's go ahead and wrap. I know, Adam, you got your show to do. And this was cool. This was a good chat. And I'll see if I come up with anything specific that I want to maybe jump off from here onto. But it was just cool to be able to get to chat and, hear some takes, This is good.
Yeah, I think so too. I think what we should do though, BigTech, you should definitely read that book for sure, obviously. But Neil, if you can talk to Atwell, that'd be kind of cool too, right? I don't know how we could figure something out like that.
Yeah, just get him into one of these spaces. That'd be great.
Yeah, I think it'd be kind of cool. And then I would encourage anyone who's a real huge Atwell expert or who really believes this theory, just DM me and or BigTech or something, and we'll go back and forth or whatever. I don't want to have somebody who partially knows it or just watched the documentary and now believes it. I want to hear the best takes from somebody who really understands it and who isn't gonna do if it's large, small, fine, but that's what I would like to do. So if there's somebody listening right now who fits in that category, just let me know. My DMs are open, or BigTech or somebody, because having somebody like that kind of push back against us would be very helpful to us. And helpful to that
Atwell.
person.
We don't gotta mess with anybody else. We can get Atwell. Atwell came on my show. Neil knows him.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I know.
He obviously still wants to talk about this because he just posted in Un's review an article about this. So
yeah, he definitely wants to talk to me, so I can definitely set that up.
Yeah,
Cool.
let's do it. I got to get his approval too. I'm gonna make an AI audiobook of the. He doesn't have an audiobook for Caesar's Messiah. I'm gonna get Speechify to read it for us.
I think he'll want to come out here and promote his own stuff anyway.
I brought up CQ Radio. Is that UHT?
It's me. I was just listening. I was wondering, is this the conspiracy that you're kicking around me in the back channels with me?
Yeah, exactly. We're digging into it, looking for can we debunk it? Is it worth anything? What does everybody think about it? You know?
I think it's terrible. I think it totally would go against everything that we're fighting for.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense at the end of the day. It just doesn't.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that it definitely is. I mean, it really is against that. That's what we were just talking about. Like, the whole narrative that comes along with it is Jews did nothing wrong. Rome was the bad guys, and now Jews have been like they're kind of vindicated. You know, Christianity was persecuting them the whole time, and they're about to, you know, they're getting back at Rome, really. So yeah, if that theory's right, it really is.
Well,
against everything.
To be fair to Atwell, he doesn't say it like that. He says it like they were a bunch of terrorist scum that needed to be dealt with. That's how he portrays it, though.
Yeah,
the Romans had to psyop them to fix them a little bit. That's what he says.
Yeah.
So, just to be clear on that.
Yeah,
that's
that's how he would say it. Yeah, that would be their justification, but still, either way, though, it's that they were in their land, you know, and it was taken from them.
He got called anti-Semitic for that book. People, that was one of the criticisms he got, was like, it's so anti-Semitic. These poor Jews, he's saying that they're all a bunch of terrorists and they needed to be psyoped. That's kind of some of the criticisms he got, which I think was a dumb criticism, to be honest. I think there's way better criticisms, like, how about just that it doesn't add up, period. Like, it just doesn't make sense.
Well, yeah, so let's go on from here. Yeah, you've got contact with him. Let's get him into space, and we'll see what he thinks about it. What's his answer to these, these holes that appear to us? You know, this doesn't make sense. Why is it like this? Why don't we have that? What does he think? Surely he's thought.
I'll get him in here.
Epic. All right. Well, I'll wrap the space. Thanks for joining in, guys. I appreciate it. Adam, I'll host you when you get your show started up.
I'm opening a space right now.
Oh, okay, cool.
I'll probably jump over there. I'm gonna run to the gym, and I've been on a good streak of hitting the gym every day, so I'm gonna keep that going.
Nice.
So.
Are HT's workout videos motivating you?
Oh
yeah. Hell yeah.
Sweet.
Yes.
All
real
right,
quick,
I'll see you later.
we got the Corey Mahler.
Oh yeah.
We got to plug that. So Corey,
I'm coming.
My Hypocrite, Saturday. Was it 9 p.m. Eastern, Hamlet?
You told me 8 p.m., but I don't. Yeah, I think you said 8 p.m.
Oh,
but...
I like the late night ones. This is the best.
Cool. Well, I'll be over in the CQ Radio thing after Adam's show. I'm gonna watch that, and then I'll be over then.
All right, I'll see you there.
Righteous. Have a good one.
All right, bye guys. Yeah, start up the Space HT. We'll just jump over there. I'm gonna wrap this one up. That's it then. Goodbye, everybody. Space is over. Go follow CQ Radio, who was just in here, and follow Adam, follow Neil, follow Nibor Amalek, follow everybody, follow me. This is being streamed on kick.com/BigTech. That's where the live streams are going. And thanks for being here. Impromptu, like sort of unscheduled little space we did there. Just thought it was an easier way we could all talk. I really like that we have these spaces. It's cool. It's a nice way that we can have a forum. It's easier than trying to host some sort of like web streaming situation. We just fire it up. Convenient. Hail Elon. Hail the robot overlords. Please don't kill us. All right. I'll see you guys next time.